Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, February 11th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Mother Jones writer Ari Berman on the Republican plan to make sure they never face that many voters again. Meanwhile, day 3 of impeachment. Day 2 highlighted the brutality of the Capitol attack. In Georgia, prosecutors launch a criminal investigation into Trump's election subversion. In a new report, the U.S. could have averted 40% of COVID deaths. That's almost 200,000 people. Fed chair says real unemployment rate is at 10%, calls for fiscal stimulus. And dozens of former Republican officials have a Zoom call about a third party, and people actually covered it like it was a news story. Joe Biden talks with Xi Jinping, raises Taiwan and human rights. Lisa Cook, economist from the University of Michigan, in the running for the first black woman to be appointed to the Fed. Wisconsin Governor Evers trying to expand Medicaid again in the face of the Wisconsin Republican Party's opposition. Lastly, taxi workers shut down the Brooklyn Bridge. They need debt forgiveness on their medallion loans. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Emma is on vacation for a couple of days. Well-deserved. My turn will come next week. In the meantime, we've got a lot to talk about today on the program. We are still, we just saw one of the most offensive clips that we can imagine here. So we're all a little bit distracted. We will get to that later in the program. It was a Fox News segment, of course. We probably should have said that. There's been a lot of stuff that's been rather disturbing out of Fox News. This one was particularly that Dave Ramsey, who wants to convince you that there's nothing systemic about our society whatsoever, and that if you are suffering from debt or job loss or whatever it is all your fault. There's nothing systemic that happens in our society. It's just a coincidence who ends up having the money and who doesn't. And there's no such thing as luck. And you can ignore the fact that looking at an area code can tell you more than you need to know about someone's future financial situation than anything else. Zip code, I should say. We will get to that. I'm also not referring to the Tucker Carlson, where he was lying about George. We'll get to all that. But anyways, today, obviously, day 3 of the impeachment hearings. And I have to say, this impeachment hearing, I think, has been revelatory to a lot of people. I am really sort of shocked at the And I gauge this. I have friends, people in my life who are not as invested in politics as people who will watch this show on a regular basis. But they know that I am. Obviously, I do this professionally. And I get texts and messages. And I have gotten so many texts in the past couple of days from people who don't generally pay too much attention to politics, saying they are both amazed at how violent things were in the Capitol and amazed at how people are just coming to realize that. I mean, both those things, not from the same people, of course. The point being that, and we were just talking before the show, Brendan, one of our producers, had said that he's looking to maybe make some bets with some friends about who think that the Republicans will vote to convict. Now, if you don't follow politics too closely, you would be surprised that Republicans are not going to vote to convict. I think it's quite possible we could get a couple more than one would have anticipated. But what that also indicates to me is that people who don't follow politics too closely think this is worthy of conviction. It suggests to me that people are following this impeachment trial more than one might imagine and are taking it quite seriously, and as well they should. It has been, I think, clearly established, right, that we know the Senate voted that Donald Trump can be held to account in an impeachment trial in the Senate, even though he's not president anymore. I think it's been quite clearly established that the rioters rioted. Now, the big question is, did Donald Trump incite this riot? And the evidence, I think, has been, fairly obvious to some of us, but I think it's going to be impossible for Republicans with a straight face to deny that's the case. Here's Joaquin Castro, in the Senate impeachment hearing yesterday. He's one of the House managers. And just if there was any question as to what Donald Trump was tweeting out was in any way guiding what those insurrectionists were interested in, this sort of puts that to bed.
At 2:24 p.m., he tweeted, quote, "Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution. USA demands the truth." Over an hour and a half into the attack, and this is what he tweeted. And he still, even at this point, did not acknowledge the attack on the Capitol, let alone condemn it. Instead, he further incites the mob against his own vice president, whose life was being threatened. Well, some of you may say, well, who was paying attention anyway? Well, that mob was paying attention.
Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. U.S. demands the truth.
Mike Pence is a bitch! Mike Pence is a bitch!
Can I speak to Pelosi? Yeah, we're coming, bitch! Oh, Mike Pence, we're coming for you too, fucking
Donald J. Trump sent a tweet out saying that Mike Pence let us down. Mike Pence let us down, people. If you want to get something done, you're going to have to do it yourself.
The insurgents amplified President Trump's tweet attacking the vice president with a bullhorn. They were paying attention. And they also followed instructions. In fact, the insurgents were at one point, as you saw, 60 feet away from the vice president and the vice president's family.
Total coincidence. Total coincidence. No proof they're reading the tweet. They just came up with the same idea. That's just a total coincidence. Must mean it's true.
Great minds think alike.
I mean, if that's not enough right there, I mean, obviously, people have seen the speech that he gave. But if that's not enough to establish that there was a relationship between what these rioters were doing and what Donald Trump was telling them, if it is in the minds of these Republican senators that that's just being superimposed upon and projected onto that dynamic just because they're Democrats saying it, how do you explain away this, as reported by the Punch Bowl, that House Leader McCarthy got into a heated exchange with Trump as he refused to grasp the severity of the Capitol attack? Here it is. House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy, as rioters were overrunning the Capitol building, engaged in a heated exchange with President Trump as he pushed them to denounce the attack, according to a source briefed on the back and forth. McCarthy, Trump's closest ally and confidant on Capitol Hill, was impressing upon Trump the real-time severity of the situation and implored him to forcefully denounce the attackers. Trump demurred. The point is that Kevin McCarthy thought that Donald Trump had the ability and the control over these people. That's why he called Trump. He wasn't calling Trump to say, come rescue me. Can you pull the car around? He wasn't saying to Trump, like, can you get in your jetpack and fly over here and get us out of here? He was saying, you have control over this insurrection, these rioters. And I'm asking you to exert that control in a way that's going to help us not get killed.
Yeah, notably, it wasn't going after the Democrats because it was Antifa coming in, right? He wasn't saying Pelosi, call off Antifa. He was saying Donald Trump, call off these MAGA people.
He was asking Trump to call off these people that Trump had sent in there. I mean, why call Trump if Trump has no control over these people? And maybe McCarthy was just good at explaining it to Trump, and that's why he didn't get that he should do that, because he didn't do it. I mean, so there you have a completely valid witness articulating that there was a relationship between these rioters and Donald Trump, that Donald Trump had control over these people. And then you also get insight into Donald Trump's mindset that he had no problem with what they were doing. And that's from Kevin McCarthy. And I got to imagine that there's other Republicans. They're sitting there and they know. They absolutely know. It really is the impressive part about this, and the scary part about this, is we still don't know how far these Republican lawmakers would be willing to go down this road. We don't know. We haven't hit the limit. And so, this concerted attempt and multi-pronged attempt by Donald Trump to reverse the election results, there is absolutely no reason to believe that if it wasn't closer, and if there wasn't a little bit more opportunity, that 45 at least of these Republican senators wouldn't have gone along with it. And these other 5 who didn't go, who are ostensibly primed to vote for his conviction, maybe, they're doing this after he's out of power. But we don't know the outer limits of where these people would have, how far they would have gone. And I would suggest to you that there's every reason to believe it would have been pretty far. Speaking of which, when we come back in just a moment, Ari Berman will be here to tell us how Republicans are determined to not lose an election again because people are voting. Let's put it that way. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. In the meantime, one of our sponsors today, BetterHelp Online Counseling. You're giving our audience 10% off their first month when you go to BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. BetterHelp gives you access to your own fully licensed and accredited therapist via phone, chat, or video. Look, very stressful time. I mean, personally, I'm in favor of therapy in all eras, but certainly during a pandemic when nerves are frayed and stress is through the roof, very helpful to see a therapist. And right now, I'm sure if people have bothered to try and look into it, therapists have long wait lists. Sometimes it can take weeks or months before they can see you. When you sign up with BetterHelp, they match you with a therapist based on your specific needs. You'll be talking to that therapist, one form or another, through your however device you decide, within 24 hours. Once BetterHelp connects you to a therapist, if you don't think it's a good fit, at any time, you can switch to a new one, and you can do so for free, and you don't need a reason, no additional charge. They make it easy for you to find someone who you are comfortable with. They have thousands of licensed therapists from all over the country. They have therapists with specialties that may not be available in your area, may be hard to find. BetterHelp also tends to be more affordable than therapists you would find through traditional means. You don't have to have insurance to use BetterHelp. And they have financial aid options for those who qualify. BetterHelp has given everyone in our audience 10% off your first month when you go to BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. That's BetterHelp, help, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. We'll put the URL in the YouTube description and also, of course, in the podcast description. Our other sponsor for today, Ground News. It is one of a first of its kind type of news comparison app. Lets you, and you can download the thing completely free. What it does is it aggregates news from different outlets across the ideological, I guess also international, across every spectrum you could imagine. Ideological, arguably financial, geographic, and it gives you a real clear notion of how different outlets report different stories. I mean, it's a great way to get your news, but it's also a great way to develop an ability to get a sense of what the built-in assumptions are in the way different media outlets report. And then you get a sense of like which ones over time you think are the most credible. You can compare Russian reporting to U.S. reporting to UK reporting. You can compare how Breitbart covers a story versus the Washington Post. It also, obviously fills you in the blind spots you might have in the news landscape. Crucial stories that you may miss, you're not exposed to. We all live in our own social media bubbles, our own news bubbles. There's a great way to get you outside of those specific bubbles. Great way to learn, really, how to read the news. Great for teenagers, frankly. I'm trying to get my daughter to understand, bias and this and that. This is one of the things I think I learned, actually, in comparative religious studies, was just depending on your discipline, you come in with certain assumptions. Well, the same thing is true with your ideology, where your geography, even who pays you, frankly. Whole point of Ground News is make you more aware of these invisible agendas that news outlets are serving so you can be a more neutral and thoughtful, mindfully informed consumer of information. Take control of how you consume news. Get the full story. Download the Ground News app totally free by going to ground.news/majority. You can find the link in the episode description. And lastly, I got an email from a listener who works for the state of Texas. And he wanted to let me know that the state of Texas, as well as possibly states, definitively your states. You just got to figure out how to find it. But it is called the Corona Relief Bill Rental Assistance Program. CRBR, it's CRBRA essentially, but you gotta really write it out to find it in your local area. Corona Relief Bill Rental Assistance. In Texas, it is texasrentrelief.com. The site is up. You can't apply until the 15th, but it is how you will get funds for back rent up to 15 months, possibly, utilities, including past due utilities, and I believe 3 months of rent going forward. So check this out. We'll put a link to texasrentrelief.com in our descriptions, and we will also just spell out Corona Relief Bill Rental Assistance. You can look in your state for that. In Texas, they're hoping to help out 70 to 80,000 households. So that's good news for those folks. All right. Want to welcome back to the program Ari Berman. He is a senior reporter at Mother Jones. He covers voting rights. He is the author of Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America. One of the most knowledgeable folks on voting rights in the country. And you can see he has his book just floating over his right shoulder. Ari, great to see you.
Hey, Sam. You know, it's all about product placement these days, as you know.
No, of course. Of course. You get to set up your own Zoom.
Just like you're in that Super Bowl type set there with the logo behind you.
Exactly. So, all right, Ari. I just want to set, often when we talk, the lodestar, if you will, is the ruling by the Supreme Court in 2013. I think it was 2013. Correct me if I'm wrong. To basically gut the Voting Rights Act by getting rid of the pre-clearance provision. And we saw, maybe it was 2011. You got to remind me of this, but it was within moments from that ruling, literally. You had Republican legislatures around the country changing their voting laws to essentially to disenfranchise voters in a way that they would have never been able to do if they had to ask the DOJ to permission to change their voting laws because they were under that pre-clearance provision. Despite all of that, and you categorize this, you catalog this for years, we saw record turnout in this last election, and maybe in part because of COVID in some respects. Give me your sense of why that happened.
Sure. So let me just give you the chronology first. So the real war on voting that I've chronicled begins in 2011, when Republicans take back all of these key states in the 2010 election, and then in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Ohio, Florida, et cetera, they start passing new restrictions on voting. So that really lays the groundwork. Then in 2013, the Supreme Court weakens the Voting Rights Act and says that those states with the longest histories of discrimination no longer have to approve their voting changes with the federal government. So that allows discriminatory laws that were blocked under the Voting Rights Act, like in Texas, to go through. And it also encourages states like North Carolina that had not yet passed these new restrictions to put them through. So those are kind of the two pivotal moments: what happened after 2010, and then what happened after the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013. But I think in 2020, we saw a tremendous amount of organizing against voter suppression. We saw a tremendous amount of organizing to get people to vote, more than I'd ever seen before. And because of COVID, in most states, people had three different ways to vote. They could vote by mail, they could vote early in person, or they could vote on election day in person. And a lot of states didn't have all three of those options. A lot of states didn't have, for example, large amounts of mail voting, or they hadn't used early voting in big numbers before. So the fact that people had so many different ways to vote, and there was so much education mobilization going in to make sure that people actually did vote and their votes actually were counted, I think that's what led to record turnout in this election. Of course, that's what terrifies Republicans, because the whole purpose of these laws was to try to prevent this kind of turnout. And the fact that we saw that turnout, that Joe Biden won, that Democrats retook the Senate, has now led them to engage in a new effort to restrict voting rights that is very similar to what they engaged in after 2011, but in my view, even worse.
There's sort of like a quality of, well, in part an arms race, right? Because every time they come up with a new innovation to suppress votes, there is, or at least there was in this last cycle, a real strong pushback. And I think in part, my sense is like, the way that the Republicans in Wisconsin tried to diminish the vote in that primary vote where they insisted on it's completely safe to come and vote. And meanwhile, the guy's in a hazmat suit. And like, I think that really inspired people to get out there and figure out how we're going to vote in a way that we hadn't seen before. I also wonder if when we look at these voter ID laws from, now 10 years, a lot of these have been instituted. Are we seeing, because younger, we're just seeing a younger cohort, like there was a lot of older voters, particularly black voters, who could get disenfranchised by not having an ID because they're older or, a lot of times like they don't have the same state records. Is there a generational shift and there's because we've caught up with it, is that a less effective way of suppressing the vote than it was 10 years ago?
That's a good question. I think to your earlier point, Wisconsin was a major clarifying moment, the primary in April. The fact that Wisconsin was the only state that did not delay their primary because of COVID and basically thought, listen, COVID's going to keep all of these Democrats from the polls so that we're going to win this crucial state Supreme Court election, which is going to give us a 5-2 majority on the Wisconsin Supreme Court so we can do whatever we want for the next decade. Democrats saw that, they heard that, and they said, we're not going to let this happen. But it was also a template for future states to realize that this is the lengths that Republicans are going to go to try to suppress the vote. Everyone's going to see it this time. It's not going to happen, under the rug like it happens in the past. Everyone's at home watching TV. Everyone is going to see these images. Everyone's going to understand what is happening here. And that led to the largest voter mobilization, largest voter education effort, I think probably in American history, to really tell people step by step, this is how you're going to be able to vote in a pandemic. And there was more emphasis not only in preparing people to vote, but making sure that their votes were actually counted than I had ever seen before. And I think, when you have a law that's in place for a decade, people can start to figure out how to organize around it. So yeah, the voter ID laws are always going to be most burdensome the first time they're introduced. So it's going to have the biggest impact. For example, in Wisconsin in 2016, it had a much bigger impact than in 2020 because people weren't used to it and they didn't know what to do to get the ID, and it was harder for them to organize around it. That said, there are always people that slip through the cracks. When we talk about the record turnout, 66% turnout, I think is what it was in 2020, that still means that a third of the country didn't vote. And there may be a lot of different reasons why they didn't vote, but for a certain percentage of people, they didn't vote because they didn't have the right documentation, they didn't have the right idea, they didn't understand the rules, and thought they weren't going to be able to participate or they actually couldn't participate. That includes, for example, like 770,000 people in Florida that should have gotten the right to vote back because they passed an initiative saying that people with past felony convictions could vote. Then the Florida legislature said, you can't vote if you owe past fines, fees, and restitution. So, Florida disenfranchised 700,000 people in the last election. That's a huge segment of people that were not able to participate in one of the most important swing states in the country. And we kind of all forgot about that after the election. And we talked about how Joe Biden underperformed with Latinos, which obviously was part of the story. But we didn't talk about how 700,000 people just couldn't vote in the first place.
Right. And one of the elements, I have 2 points. One that I've learned from you in the past is that sometimes it's not even the actual provisions. It's the confusion around the provisions that it just, acts as what they call like a kludge, and so it's like, it just provides a mental obstacle to voting, and people are just so confused by the whole thing. They're just like, I don't want to get caught into that. I also say in terms of that Wisconsin primary, a lot of folks I know in Wisconsin who work in this area, they were very thankful that Bernie Sanders maintained his staying in that primary race for Wisconsin because they knew that would drive turnout, and that was really important in terms of winning those, particularly that Supreme Court race that was there. So let me ask you this before we get into the specifics of what you've been working on in terms of reporting the reaction to the 2020 race. To what extent down the road, if we're going to see any type of further cases involving voting rights, to what extent will all that we saw during COVID, the increase in mail-in balloting, the increase in early voting, to what extent does this establish evidence that these things function to increase turnout, and B, they can be done without any significant threat to our election security, right? I mean, we had 80 cases that established there doesn't seem to be any election fraud here. I mean, to what extent does this become sort of like facts on the ground? Like, I mean, if I'm going to argue a case and say, we know mail-in balloting increases turnout by X percentage, that means if you get rid of it, it's going to reduce voting by X percentage. And there is no compelling reason to do so because we know it can be done without fraud.
Well, we had two really compelling data points in 2020, which is that we gave people the most options to vote than they ever had before. And we had the highest turnout since 1900. And not only that, but it was also judged to be the most secure election in history. So there was no trade-off between access and security. We had the most access we'd seen in 100 years, and we had the most security we had seen ever. And so when Republican states start taking away things like mail voting, there's going to be a very strong record to say this increased turnout. It increased turnout specifically among these groups. And there was no fraud, so there's no reason to get rid of it. And so this is going to be a really interesting experiment. It's not going to be a theoretical experiment because the Brennan Center for Justice released a new report. They found that 165 new voting restrictions have been introduced in 33 states so far already this year. I mean, legislators just got back in session and they're already doing this.
I just want to clarify, like over the past 30-some days. Wow.
In the past month, basically, 165 new voting restrictions have been introduced in 33 states, and half of them target mail voting. So mail voting is in many ways the new voter ID because Republicans blame it for losing, even though mail voting was something that was pushed by Republicans for many, many years, was used more by Republicans in states like Georgia and Arizona until 2020. And if you think about who the Republican electorate is, they are older and more rural. So they need mail voting more than younger urban Democrats that can get to the polls much easier in places like Atlanta. And so I think this whole attack on mail voting by Republicans is incredibly short-sighted. Just because Democrats used it more in 2020 because they took COVID more seriously doesn't mean that Republicans aren't going to use it more in 2022 or 2024 when Donald Trump is not demonizing it. And in fact, state-level Republicans were begging their voters to vote by mail. That's why you saw all of these mailers sent by Republicans in Florida, in Georgia, and Arizona, all these other states saying, please vote by mail. They had automatic lists of people that got mail ballots. So it was the easiest way for them to vote. It wasn't like you didn't even have to show up at your polling place. You got a ballot automatically mailed to you if you had voted by mail in the past. And the only reason they didn't use it is because Trump told them not to.
So why are they, and I want to get into the specifics of the states that you look at, which all coincidentally were, sort of the states that came down to, that basically the race came down to in 2020. But why, if it is the case, I mean, if you can do that calculation, right, that like 2022, 2024, we're probably going to revert back to, sort of like traditional patterns, or we could anyways. And if we do, this foreclosure of mail-in balloting is going to inhibit the Republican vote tally more. Why are they doing this?
Well, they're doing it because they're looking at the numbers in 2020 and they're seeing that more Democrats used mail voting than Republicans used mail voting. And they're only looking at the data from 2020. They're not looking at the data from any past elections, because the past elections would show them mail voting was split between the parties or even used more by Republicans. So they're only looking at the last election. They're thinking that Democrats are going to use mail voting to increase voter turnout in future elections. That there's a model now in Georgia, for example. Stacey Abrams used mail voting a lot in 2018 to increase turnout among Black voters, particularly rural Black voters that don't get a lot of attention, and that Democrats use that again very effectively in 2020. You know what? Republicans could do the same thing. If Republicans actually spent their time trying to turn out voters instead of suppress Democratic voters, they could use mail voting as effectively, if not more effectively, than Democrats. But they're looking at it very short-sightedly, and they're thinking, well, if Democrats are going to use mail voting more than we are in 2022 and 2024, then we need to get rid of it or make it harder, even though there's no reason why Republicans can't use it again in 2022 and 2024.
Let me offer a counterpoint just from the lessons I think we learned in the last sort of the end of Reconstruction and the new Jim Crow era, or I should say the old Jim Crow era. And that is to the extent that, particularly when we're talking about southern states, to the extent that we saw the rollout of programs to disenfranchise people voting, they weren't so happy about poor folk in general, not just African Americans not voting, but also just poor whites. And they were happy to disenfranchise both Black people and poor white people because, that they thought that they may not be able to get so many votes from there, too. And so I'm not convinced that part of that is just like, you know what, we can shape this electorate. We can get rid of a significant portion of the African-American vote. And then we can also shape this electorate so that to the extent that it's, we're making the electorate more white again, we can also maybe make it a little bit more wealthy, which might help them. I don't know.
Yeah, except now, wealthier whites are voting more Democratic in suburban Atlanta than poor whites in rural Georgia, although it tends to vary depending on where you're talking about. I think they feel like they're okay with some collateral damage as long as it hurts Democrats more. And so I think that's the general feeling. I mean, you look at Georgia, for example. They're talking about getting rid of automatic voter registration, where you automatically are registered when you get a driver's license at the DMV. 5 million of 7 million voters in Georgia registered that way. So you're talking about taking away a form of registration that 5 million people use. They're talking about getting rid of mail voting. So you need an excuse now to vote absentee. That would get rid of something that was used by 1.3 million voters in 2020. So, I mean, this is going to hurt a lot of Republicans too. They're talking about getting rid of forms of voting that millions and millions of people use in the last election. These are not minor tweaks to the electoral process. These are radical changes in terms of how the election worked. And they're just betting that it's going to hurt more Democrats than Republicans. And it's hard to say they're wrong if you look at the data from 2020. But I think it's a very short-sighted political argument because Republicans also benefited from high turnout in 2020. That's what doesn't get talked about a lot. They did very well in the House of Representatives. They did very well in state legislative races. They brought a lot of infrequent voters who like Trump but don't really like the Republican Party out to the polls. Those people could also be disenfranchised if you make it more difficult to vote. Because if they're not that inclined to vote in general, then you make it more difficult and you see what happens. It's kind of like the vaccination process right now. How many more people are going to get vaccinated? We can go to every pharmacy and do it, compared to having to jump through a million hoops and call 20 different doctors to try to figure out if a vaccine's available. That's what they want to do with voting in Georgia. They don't want to make it that you can vote easily. They want to make it that you have to jump through all these hoops, and inevitably that's going to decrease participation.
Yeah, that is a story that gets lost. Both in 2018 and in 2020, the Republicans saw a record turnout as well. It just so happened that the Democratic record turnout was bigger. I wonder if they're thinking that they're going to lose those Trump voters. They're going to stay at home because there's no Donald Trump, and maybe they're not going to come out. I don't know. They were out in 2018, and Donald Trump wasn't on the ballot. All right, well, let's talk about a little bit more about Georgia. I did not know this about that Hancock County had been had basically been an opt-in or a drop-in. I can't remember the term, where they are now part of pre-clearance because of their voting, I guess, disenfranchisement attempts. But tell us more about what Georgia's doing.
So I told this story in a recent piece of mine, which is there's a rural county in Georgia called Hancock County. It's about 100 miles southeast of Atlanta. And there was a mayoral election in the county seat of Sparta, which has about 1,000 people, and it's 90% Black. Now, through a weird series of circumstances, the Board of Elections in Hancock County, which is a majority Black county, was majority white. And white members of the Board of Elections tried to remove Black voters from the rolls in advance of this mayoral election. And they tried to challenge the registrations of 20% of Black voters in this county seat of Sparta. And they sent police to serve them summons, saying they had to appear at the Board of Elections hearing or they would be removed from the rolls, which is a very, very intimidating tactic. And what happened was that a lot of people were removed from the rolls in this majority Black county, in this majority Black city. A white mayor was elected for the first time in 32 years in the town of Sparta, and voter participation declined by 40%. Now, the reason I told this story in my new article was that the county attorney for Hancock County, who defended this voter purge, is a guy by the name of Barry Fleming. He's a state representative. He is now chair of a special committee on election integrity in Georgia that the Speaker of the House set up to put in place all of this restrictive registration. So the guy that was in charge of purging Black voters in Georgia is now going to be the guy in charge of quote unquote election integrity in the state. And that's the kind of thing we're dealing with here. And the proposals that Georgia is talking about, we'll see what actually passes, but the proposals they're talking about, getting rid of automatic registration, getting rid of no excuse absentee voting, getting rid of ballot drop boxes, getting rid of the ability of third-party groups to send voter registration materials, preventing people who move to the state in November from voting in a runoff in January, which makes absolutely no sense because they're residents of the state. These are huge changes to the process at a time when Georgia had record turnout in 2020, and of course, flipped for Joe Biden. For the first time, they voted for a Democrat in 30 years, and elected 2 Democrats to the Senate, 1 Black, 1 Jewish. First Black member of the Senate from Georgia, first Jewish member to the Senate in Georgia at a time when Black turnout was higher than it had ever been before. So this, with an election, which the Secretary of State, the Republican Secretary of State, said over and over and over to Donald Trump, there was zero evidence of fraud. They had 3 recounts in Georgia, and they had 0 evidence of fraud. So, I mean, it's really the best test case for what happened in 2020. There was record voter turnout. There was no problems, unlike past elections in Georgia. And then the minute that happens, the first thing Republicans do is turn around and say, we're going to target all the methods that led to this record turnout.
Let's move, because Georgia obviously is not the only place where Republicans are doing this. Arizona, you got Republican state legislatures.
Arizona's crazy. I mean, of course, remember, this is the state that just censured Cindy McCain, just censured the Republican governor of the state. So it's a crazy time there. The Arizona legislature has introduced 34 bills to make it harder to vote, which is such an crazy number to introduce so far. And it runs the whole gamut. They're talking, like in Georgia, they're talking about getting...
I don't mean to interrupt you. How many bills could they have introduced, period, since that time? Like, I mean, this is the thing that I feel like Republicans understand in a way that Democrats never seem to understand. Their job number one when they get into office, I mean, if they have introduced that many bills, and maybe it's possible that's only a fraction of the bills. Maybe they've introduced 1,000 bills. I don't think so. But they get in, and their job number one is, what can we change legislatively to enhance our ability to maintain our power? Period. End of story. The idea that there is a broad constituency out there for, like, when you guys get in office, I want to make sure that you guys are making sure that the electorate is 7/10 the size that it is now. You know, like no, that they do this. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, when Republicans get in power, the first thing they think about is how can we abuse power to prevent the other party from ever getting in power. And when Democrats take power, they just make all of these excuses why they can't exercise the power that they actually have. And so, I mean, it really, I mean, what's happening, what Democrats are doing in the U.S. Senate by refusing to get rid of the filibuster, and what Republicans are doing in states like Georgia and Arizona could not be any starker in terms of how they view the power they have. But so the kind of things they're doing in Georgia, they're trying to get rid of mail voting. They're trying to eliminate this list or purge hundreds of thousands of voters from a list of who automatically receives mail ballots. Arizona is a state where 80% of people vote by mail. So 3.2 million voters are on a list of people that get absentee ballots every single election. And they want to get rid of that list or pare it back significantly. The craziest proposal, well, there's two other proposals. So they have all these laws that target mail voting. Then they have a law that says you can only have a certain number of polling places. So at the same time, they're trying to get rid of mail voting. They're also basically saying, we're going to make it really hard to vote in person too. So under one proposal, Maricopa County, the largest county in the state, which flipped for Joe Biden, they, instead of being able to have 100 polling places, would only be able to have 15 polling places under one of these proposals, which is just totally crazy. The most insane proposal in Arizona or in any other state, though, is a bill that would basically say the legislature can appoint its own presidential electors anytime it wants, no matter how people vote. So like Arizona votes for Biden, like forget it. We don't care. We're just going to appoint our own electors and there's nothing you can do about it. This is exactly what Trump wanted them to do in 2020. And they didn't do it because they didn't have the power to do it. And now they're basically saying the election's meaningless in the state because we can do whatever we want to overturn it. And so I don't think that's going to pass because I think that's just way too crazy. But the fact that it's even on the table is really chilling. And I think the strategy here is just flood the zone with as many crazy ideas as possible. So then you fight the craziest ideas, but then the ones that are slightly less crazy, that's the compromise that is allowed to go through. And that's what I'm concerned about here. Is not that everything's going to pass, although it could, because Republicans are in control of Arizona, just like they're in control of state government in Georgia. It's that there's going to be so many moving targets. It's going to be really, really difficult to defeat all of them.
Pennsylvania, we have a similar dynamic.
Similar dynamic, a little bit different. They've introduced, as of a week ago, 14 bills to make it harder to vote. They want to do things like get rid of no excuse absentee voting, which all but 2 Republicans voted for. They want to get rid of ballot drop boxes. They want to make sure that your ballot has to arrive by election day, not a few days after, even though that's written into the Pennsylvania law. A lot of this stuff's not going to pass immediately because they have a Democratic governor that can veto it. What I'm concerned about in Pennsylvania is there might not be a Democratic governor after 2022 because Tom Wolf is term limited. So if a Republican gets in there, they can pass this stuff in time for 2024. There's also this proposal to try to gerrymander the state courts. You might remember it was the Pennsylvania state courts that struck down extreme gerrymandering in Pennsylvania. It was the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that refused to pass all these restrictions on mail voting that Republicans wanted. So now they're saying, we want to redraw the courts. This is, again, one of the craziest proposals I've seen. They want to gerrymander the courts that struck down gerrymandering. And what they want to do is, instead of elections being statewide, so people can run from anywhere in Pennsylvania, they want to draw districts for every state Supreme Court justice, for example, so that they can gerrymander the district so that instead of a Democratic progressive majority on the Supreme Court, there will be a gerrymandered Republican Supreme Court. Then of course, would be hearing challenges to voter suppression and gerrymandering that would be passed by these legislators.
And we need to make something really clear here. The role of a state Supreme Court justice, or frankly, any judge, is not to be representative of a specific group of people. I mean, it's one thing to have these judges elected by the entire state, but there is absolutely no rationale to have a regional election for these people unless you wanted to fashion that region in such a way that it will always elect a specific type of person to this court. I mean,
of course,
no logic to that whatsoever. I mean, it's one thing to say we need to have state legislature from, my town because we have specific interests about what has to happen in any given place. But there's no logic whatsoever to have Supreme Court justices come from a certain part of the state. That's just absurd, we should say. And we should also say this state Supreme Court struck down the gerrymandering that took place in the congressional districts, but not in the state legislature districts. So you still have that dynamic where in Pennsylvania, more Democrats come out to vote for their state lawmakers, but more Republicans win. That you all have in, let's say, Wisconsin.
Exactly. And that's why a decade after they drew the maps in 2011 in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan and all of these states, Republicans are still in control of the legislature. And I just find it really surprising that Wisconsin would vote for Joe Biden. They would vote to have a Democratic governor. Same with Michigan, same with Pennsylvania. But they're so happy with their Republican legislature. They would leave them in power for an entire decade. It would be the only position in the state to which they would say, we like the Republicans so much, let's keep them in control. The only reason they're still there is because of gerrymandering. It's the only reason they're still in control in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania is because they drew the districts in 2011. It worked perfectly. They're still in power. Now they're going to draw them all over again, although it's going to be a little bit different in those states because there's either Democratic governors or in Michigan, there's going to be an independent redistricting commission. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in Michigan, for example, when there are actually fair districts drawn, how the state votes.
Well, I can tell you what's going to happen. It's going to end up going to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's going to say the state legislature cannot delegate that authority to an independent commission. We're just going to allow the Republicans to redraw the districts. That's my guess anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that would be very ironic because when the Supreme Court said that federal courts can't review partisan gerrymandering in 2018, they expressly said there are other solutions like independent redistricting commission. So it would be Mitch McConnell-esque cynical, which I'm not putting past this current Supreme Court, to say it's kind of like how Mitch McConnell said, let's delay impeachment until after Trump's gone and then we can't impeach him because he's no longer in office. I mean, that is essentially what they'd be doing with independent redistricting commissions if they took that line.
Okay, I got two questions for you to wrap this up. One, I think people heard the story of, and this played out in the Supreme Court census case, but there was a story about a daughter whose dad died, who was a big Republican operative. She found his computer hard drive as she was going through his stuff. They were a little estranged. They had different political philosophies. She found that this guy had written out for the Department of Justice, essentially their alibi to lie about why they need to not have immigrants counted on the census. And this played a big part in that census case. He was also known as like the godfather of Republican sort of gerrymandering and sort of vote suppression strategy down to the very granular demographic level. So you guys are going to be able to eliminate Latino voters here. Are you going to be able to eliminate? How much has his passing away, has that affected anything, or was basically his expertise absorbed into the Republican Borg?
Yeah, I think that's right. Tom Hoffler is his name, and he's passed away. But yeah, I mean, I think there's other people in the Republican Party that know how to gerrymander. And there was just a report out from the Brennan Center for Justice today that I'd urge people to look at, because they're basically saying all of the population growth in states like Texas and Florida and Georgia and North Carolina is coming from people of color. 4 out of 5 new eligible voters are people of color. But Republicans are going to try to draw these maps to maintain white power in the face of these massive demographic changes. And I believe that's the story of American politics right now, writ large, what the Republican Party is doing as the country becomes more diverse. And I think that's why there was a Capitol insurrection in the first place. But I think it's going to be played out at the most granular level in redistricting, because they're going to say, how can we weaken the power of all of these communities that should actually have more power, because they are the future of the country, but instead we're going to give them less power. And so I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And I don't think they need Tom Hoffler around to be able to do it. They have other people that can draw these maps. But it's going to be really, really interesting to see what we learn about this process, because they're going to be pursuing the exact same strategy that he pursued. The question is, are we going to be able to do anything about it? And are the courts going to be able to do anything about it? And I think I'm very, very concerned that the 6-3 Supreme Court is going to have either no problems with this or just say we shouldn't get involved at all.
Right. I have a feeling that it's going to be the latter, because when things are going their way, then they stand back. All right. So lastly, you brought up this point earlier. Republicans get into office. The first thing they do is they try and disenfranchise voters that they think aren't going to vote for them. Democrats get into office. They get power. They look at the filibuster. Now, you said like they should get rid of the filibuster, but it's not just for the sake of getting rid of the filibuster, although I think we would both agree that that would make things more democratic, small d. Like you could actually have the party that wins the most votes make the laws. And so us as a voter can determine like, hey, I really don't like it when they get in power because this is what they do, as opposed to sort of say like, oh, we would do this, but we can't because of them. But the real issue here is, when the Democrats took control of the House, they passed H.R. 1. Among other things in this about corruption, it was about restoring the Voting Rights Act. It was about increasing the federal right to vote so that it would be harder for states to do these type of things that you've been talking about and you've been reporting on for years. Do you think, have you heard in the course of your reporting, when that there is going to be an attempt, obviously, to pass, I think they call it the John Lewis Act at this point. Is that going to be the moment that they use to try and get rid of the filibuster? I mean, give me your sense of how this is going to play out, because that has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, so Democrats have two incredibly important pieces of legislation that could literally save American democracy. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act to restore the Voting Rights Act, and H.R. 1, the People Act, which is the most sweeping democracy reform bill in a generation, and would address all of the things that we are talking about by mandating early voting and automatic registration and independent redistricting and voting rights for people with past felony convictions. I mean, every good thing on voting is in that bill. And the only way they're going to pass them is by eliminating the filibuster or creating an exception to the filibuster for laws that pertain to voting and democracy, because there's no way these bills are going to get 60 Republican votes. Lisa Murkowski is the only Republican that signed on to the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and not a single Republican has signed on to H.R. 1 or S1, as it's known in the Senate. So, I mean, this is going to be a real thing here. And I think the strategy for the Democrats is, let's let the Republicans filibuster this, and people are going to get so angry that they are going to say we can't allow this to happen again. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. That's a risky strategy. I would like there to be more of a strategy going into it to try to figure out what you do. The key people obviously are Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. I think Joe Manchin's a tough nut to crack because he's a Democrat from West Virginia. Kyrsten Sinema is a senator from Arizona in a state where they've introduced 34 new voter suppression laws. So I do not think it should be a tough argument for her to say, listen, you want to survive, you want the Democratic Party to survive, you want Mark Kelly to survive. The Republican legislature in Arizona is going to do everything they can to prevent you from winning your next election unless we pass the For the People Act and unless we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I think you could make that argument to Joe Manchin too, but I think Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona, one of those states that's targeted by voter suppression, that should at least be an easier argument for her. And then it's just down to Manchin. And then the question is, you're a Democrat. Do you want the Democratic Party to survive as a political institution, or do you want Republicans to be able to entrench power through anti-democratic means for the next decade and beyond? So you're never in the majority. And that's basically the end of it. I mean, so I don't know if that's going to work on Joe Manchin. I don't know what he really cares about. But this is not just about, I mean, it's about two things. It's about small d democracy and whether it survives, but it's also about whether the Democratic Party is going to be able to have power beyond 2 years. And I think it's going to be very, very hard for them to keep power in the House or the Senate if all of these anti-democratic measures that we're talking about go through and the Democrats have no federal response.
I got to say, Joe Manchin is an interesting character in all of this because he seems to posture in certain ways and then ends up voting. I think we'll get a sense of this on the $15 minimum wage, et cetera, but he tends to end up where he lands is really the thing where you got to watch. He likes to do a lot of like loop-de-loops before he gets there, but he generally lands, I think. Well, I guess we'll see, but it would be interesting legacy for Joe Manchin to be the vote that gets a sweeping voting reform into law. Ari Berman, always fascinating stuff. We will link to your piece at Mother Jones and, of course, to your book if people want to understand the fight that was involved in voting rights. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Great to talk to you again, Sam. Thanks a lot.
All right, we're going to do a quick break. We'll be right back. Finish this up. So, just finishing up, the impeachment trial has resumed in the Senate, and we were talking at the beginning of the show how it's quite clear, and Joaquin Castro did a great job of showing essentially Donald Trump's tweets, and then who and the impact that had on the insurrectionists who were crashing the Capitol. Here is a good sign that the Republicans are a little bit concerned that this is just all too clear and to the American public and capturing their attention. Fox and Friends, always my barometer for how the Republicans are going to spin something on any given day, and particularly Brian Kilmeade, because it feels like that Ducey has just sort of checked out a little bit. And I think he sort of farmed out being the shill to his son. But here is Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends this morning.
A lot of video. Again, day one was full of video, almost like the cold open to a Rachel Maddow show. And then some of the surveillance video we hadn't seen yet. No doubt about it. Pence, Pelosi, and Romney were in danger. No doubt about it. It was really bad. It was a pleasure, though, to hear cops, police officers being praised for a change from Democrats. We haven't heard that in about 2 years, and they should be praised every day, and especially the way they acted here. They never should have had the January 6th rally. Does anyone disagree with that? If President Trump wanted to show his popularity, win Georgia, at least one of the seats. That would have actually shown more. It got out of control. I don't think he ever intended that, and that's the point. Was President Trump having a rally get them fired up? Did he ever intend for them to breach the building and threaten to kill his vice president, the most loyal person he had, Mitt Romney, who he's had disagreement from his party? And they were looking for some of the more high-profile lawmakers, no doubt about it. But it became very redundant, too. It was like the same thing, the same person showing more emotion, deciding something personal about them. And that's when I think they're beginning to lose the public. As we get set for day 3, they're going to finish up with some more testimony. Right. And then we got more of this. And then we're going to see what the Trump team has.
Yeah, my sense is that if the Kilmeade thought they were losing the public, then he wouldn't be suggesting that they're losing the public in the same way. He would be he wouldn't be defending and making excuses for Donald Trump. But if your argument is that his interest was never to let it get out of control and have them do that, then you need to answer the question, why is he holding a rally on January 6th at the moment before they're certifying the election? Like, if it wasn't to impact that act taking place in the Capitol, what was it for? What was the point of it? Brian Kilmeade does not have an answer for that, because if he were to answer it, he would know it was to intimidate by any means necessary. You got to fight hard. This is special fight when it's being stolen, he said.
Otherwise, you're a coward.
Otherwise, you're a coward. Got to do it right. Got to fight in a different way, if you know what I mean. We will know more about this impeachment. I think that the Republicans are getting a little worried. They're going to lose a couple of those votes in the Senate. We will discuss this and more tomorrow. And for those of you sticking around today, we will head into the fun half, but I won't be with you because, as is the tradition around here, Thursdays, the crew comes in. Emma, of course, on vacation. but old Matt will be with us. Let me just remind you, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Don't forget, we have information for you if you are in need of any type of rent assistance or utility assistance over the past year. Check out, we have at least the URL for the Texas one and also the name of the program that you should be Googling in your state. If I imagine people will be listening to this and they will send in more, and we will let you know over the next couple of days as they come in. We're going to be on vacation next. Oh, no, I'm going to be, but Emma won't be. So Emma will be able to tell folks about it too. We've never done this before. I'm a little bit nervous because I've never been on vacation and the show's actually continuing. I mean, I've been gone for a day or two, but not 4 days. It's a little nerve-wracking. But just a reminder, that's crazy, though, over the course of 10 years, right? JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Don't forget AM Quickie. Find it at amquickie.com. And justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. Get 10% off. At this point, they've gotten so much love from people on Twitter because Glenn Greenwald had attacked me for shilling for this co-op that I think that they're close to making like a Glenn Greenwald blend.
Yeah, don't let Glenn find about Hello Tushy.
Yeah, no, that is going to be a real problem. That's probably my greatest liability. Is the Hello Tushy stuff. Although I got to tell you, I don't know, Matt, you may not have bought into that, but believe me, it's a revelation. Do we have old Matt? Is old Matt here? There he is.
Hello, Sam.
Folks, don't forget to check out Nomi's show today. You can find it at youtube.com/The Nomiki Show and The Nomi Key Show. And I get so many emails. I can't even tell you. And so many different people tell me to do it different ways. But I think I need to do it as 2 syllables. Nomi Key Show. Twitch.tv/the_Nomi Key_show. Old Matt, what's happening on Doomed?
On Doomed, we're gonna push back Doomed. It usually is on a Thursday night. We're gonna push it back just a few days. Follow me on Twitter at Matt Binder and on YouTube, youtube.com/Matt Binder because I want to fully cover everything that happens in this impeachment trial because it's getting kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is actually. It really is. It's getting a little bit more intense than I think I had even anticipated, frankly. So,
all right. So, if you had a daily show, I get covering the everyday stuff and then just updating it the next day. But if you do a weekly show like me, if I do a show tonight, it's going to be outdated by tomorrow. So I'm going to wait a few days. I'm going to get all that information. We're going to have a full-blown show about the second impeachment of Donald Trump over the weekend. Follow me at Matt Binder on Twitter, youtube.com/Matt Binder, and you will be updated to know exactly when that is. And also, I'll have another video for those of you who like the Boogaloo Boy video that I put out. This one's not about Boogaloo Boys or Jimmy Dore, but if you like that video, I have another video like that coming out in the coming week as well.
Oh! Jamie, back from your ski. Were you skiing? Where were you? You going to Utah? There was reports that you couldn't leave the state because you were quarantined. What's going on?
Yeah, so I went skiing in Utah with my friend and his family, and I followed all the rules. Don't worry, which for going to Utah was no rules, but for coming back from Utah, I had to get a COVID test, and now I got to quarantine myself in my apartment for a little while and then get another COVID test. It was kind of annoying because you had to enter a Utah address in order to get tested in Utah, which seems like a bit of a catch-22. But the people at the drive-through testing facility were very helpful. They helped us fudge it, as I'm sure they do many times a day. And I am COVID-free, as far as I know.
Okay, well, admitted to a civil misdemeanor, maybe.
Yeah, Cuomo's going to hunt you down for that.
Oh, boy. Well, federalism means that they do not talk to each other. So I think it's fine. Also, I managed to screw up my neck a little bit. So I have now the chance to try out this wonderful CBD salve that they keep sending me.
There you go.
I wouldn't worry about the state. You know, Cuomo is already reopening the restaurants, reopening MSG and Barclays Center. Obviously, he's given up and doesn't care anymore.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, he wrote the book. That's how I look at it. He wrote the book. He's got a safe face. He can't admit it's getting worse because he wrote the book. He's successful. He did it. He got rid of it. To admit otherwise, he'd be going back on everything he wrote in print forever in that book.
I'm just
sitting around his office going like, maybe we should have just waited before we put the book out.
Right.
I'm just having.
I wish, but that would take him like having some sort of introspection and knowing that he did something that he shouldn't have. But Cuomo doesn't seem like the type.
Like, what do we have to do to keep this guy from taking the credit? Just like Giuliani happened to be, the mayor on 9/11, and he somehow got credit for that. I feel like it's going to be the same thing with Cuomo, no matter how badly he messed it up.
Cuomo will have to just befriend and then eventually defend the next Donald Trump, pretty much. That's what he would need for liberals to decide that Cuomo is not the hero that they think he is.
I think he's got a little bit of tarnish. I don't think it's not 6 to 8 months ago. That's my sense anyways. I mean, the idea though, I understand the pressures to open up and, because obviously like they don't want to do anything to provide relief to people who are working in these places. But you can't wait 6 weeks. Like it's going to be, like we're going to get, like, you're going to be able to do like legit outdoor dining again in 6 weeks. Like you can't wait. It's just insanity to me, but,
Valentine's Day is coming up, Sam. What do you expect all these couples to do?
Yes. Gets COVID together, stays together. New Matt. What is happening on the Matt Leckian media platform? Wait, did you do Jamie? No, you didn't.
I did not.
Okay.
Whoops. So this week on the Antifada, we had on Kay Gabriel, who is my comrade from the DSA Emerge Caucus, and she's also very active in the Defund the NYPD campaign. And she kind of gave a bit of a counterpoint to some of our more, shall we say, ultra-left, anti-state communist guests who have been very critical of campaigns to defund the police because they believe that it points in a non-revolutionary direction. So we try to be fair and balanced at the Antifada and hear out all viewpoints from, anti-state communists to other kinds of communists. So I think it was a really good back and forth. And
they report, you decide.
Yeah, exactly. So that's up now, patreon.com/the Antifada. Also, we're doing a special Twitch stream at an earlier time at 6 p.m. Tomorrow, Friday, instead of the usual time, 7. So everyone tune in at 6 p.m. Eastern, twitch.tv/the Antifada for me and Sean, and we'll have a lot of fun.
Matt.
Ben Burgess joining Left Reckoning tonight at 8 Eastern at the Left Reckoning YouTube channel. We're going to be talking about Haiti, Ecuador, liberal succession. So blue states are going to secede. So we'll talk about that a little bit, and the future of oil. So that's tonight. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning to access the post game.
All right, folks. I'll be back tomorrow. You will be in good hands. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457-238. 56, 27, 1/2, 5/8, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance. Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Hey. Indeed. Hello, everybody. Hello, Jamie. Hello, Matt. Hello, Brendan. How are you all doing today?
I'm all right, despite having a messed up neck. Turns out I am not as limber as I was when I was a child and used to go skiing a lot. So, but you know what? At least I had fun messing up my neck this time instead of just sleeping on it weird.
There we go.
Yeah, I only ever went snowboarding one time, but I remember being very sore, very, very sore the next day.
Yeah, it seems like something that would take a lot out of you, like every muscle being stretched and taken to its limit.
Yeah. So if anyone is mad at me for going skiing right now, you can take comfort in the knowledge that my body feels terrible right now.
How was the plains? That's a question, an actual question. I'm not knocking on you. I'm wondering a live update from someone who was there on the ground. Well, not on the ground technically, in the air.
Well, I think Delta is doing a pretty good job. From what I understand, they had, every other seat was empty and they sterilized everything and, had certain protocols in place. I don't know. Being in the airport with all those people felt like kind of like a bad idea. But, I mean, look, I followed all the guidelines. And if we really want to beat this thing, we need to do it on a policy level. So
yeah, I did one. I was just gonna say I did a flight last summer to North Dakota, back before North Dakota really even months before North Dakota ever even saw a spike. And it was the same thing where going out there was absolutely zero restrictions. North Dakota couldn't be happier to have us. And then you come back and all it was they called me every couple of days to make sure we were quarantining. But it was the thing with Delta is, there was it was empty. The airport was kind of empty when we went. And so was the plane. And Delta is doing this thing where they're leaving a seat open, but that's not just out of the goodness of their heart. I think there's also a demand issue with this stuff. And frankly, I mean, ultimately, if there's a policy lesson to this, it's that we have to nationalize the airlines, right? Like, these industries were created by the states, often and within living memory, and that's how it needs to go back to.
Word.
Right. How are the fine people in Utah handling it? Are they wearing masks? Are they? I mean, obviously, every person from Utah isn't the same. But how's the state as a whole, sort of, from just your experience?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag, I will say, but I was in Park City, which is sort of like a fancy ski vacation town, and it tends to be a little more liberal than the rest of the state. So I don't know, people were being pretty good about it. There were signs up everywhere. There was some indoor dining. I did do a little bit of indoor dining, but everyone was like following the mask protocols. Who knows, man. It seemed all right.
Sounds good. It sounds
There
good.
is I could say there is a massive difference. Like North Dakota barely stopped indoor dining ever. Like they briefly did when there was a spike in December, and then they went back to it. And like people think they're like, when you talk to it's just like it's a trip.
Yeah,
like being in New York, I think we get a completely different perception of how seriously the rest of the country is taking this stuff. Because
for sure, and
well,
also the idea of not to excuse indoor dining elsewhere, but like our vision of indoor dining in New York, where you're literally like touching elbows with someone in some small restaurant. Every restaurant like in the rest of the country is like the size of like a retail store in New York City. They're massive.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess I didn't really get out into the more rural parts of Utah, so maybe I have to go back and do a better survey.
You should. All right, guys. Let's jump right in. Let's take. Did you play that Tucker Carlson clip earlier today? No, right?
Mm-mm.
We gotta get to this. So Tucker Carlson is not taking the impeachment trial well, apparently. The Democrats, the House managers who've put together basically the case against Trump have done a very good job, both in terms of the evidence, in terms of just the emotional, description of what was going on to really connect with people, because that's an important part of a trial. Also, the case is being made really well, just from like a factual standpoint. Like even Donald Trump's lawyers on the first day, before any video evidence was really even presented, like it was yesterday, in which they showed stuff that no one had seen before, like security camera footage showing just how close the Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol got to actual members of Congress. They even admitted that the case from it was really good. So Tucker Carlson not handling it well. And when you're a Fox News host who likes to dabble in far-right conspiracies and white supremacy, there's a really easy thing you can do to try to turn the tables around and get people to not sort of pay attention to the fact that Trump is looking really bad in his impeachment trial. Let's play this clip.
So what does all of this mean exactly? We're not sure what it means, and we're not going to speculate. We do know for certain that the known facts of what happened on January 6th deviate in very important ways from the story they are now telling us, including the story they told us today in the impeachment hearings. And in many places, the known facts bear no resemblance to the story they're telling. They're just flat out lying. There's no question about that. The question is, why would they lie about this? For an answer, think back to last spring. Beginning on Memorial Day, BLM and their sponsors in corporate America completely changed this country. They changed this country more in 5 months than it had changed in the previous 50 years. How'd they do that? They used the sad death of a man called George Floyd to upend our society. Months later, we learned that the story they told us about George Floyd's death was an utter lie. There was no physical evidence that George Floyd was murdered by a cop. The autopsy showed that George Floyd almost certainly died of a drug overdose, fentanyl. But by that point, facts didn't matter. It was too late. Cities had been destroyed, along with the fabric of this country itself. Scores of people had been killed. Democratic partisans used a carefully concocted myth, a lie, to bum rush America into overturning the old order and handing them much more power. It worked flawlessly. So why wouldn't they do it again?
Well, where do we begin? The whole thing is just insane. First of all, the idea that a man, what was it that Tucker said? A man called George Floyd. But the idea that he it was proven that he did not die from police violence is not true. Second of all, he said that scores of people died during the BLM protest. I mean, you use a term like that when you know you're peddling bullshit and can't give an actual number, because then you can be outright debunked. I mean, that's why Trump would constantly say many people are saying, or some people are saying. That's the phrasing you use when you can't put an actual number to it, because it is nil or completely a nonsensically low number. Scores of people did not die.
Well, I mean, score technically would be 20, and definitely not scores of 20 people died.
Right. And also, when they talk about people who died at the BLM events, remember that they are counting the people who died at the hands of right-wingers like Kyle Rittenhouse, who murdered 2 Black Lives Matter protesters at a Black Lives Matter rally. I mean, it's a ridiculous metric when they're the ones who are killing people. I mean,
and at the hands of the police.
Yes, and at the hands of the police, yes. And also, we're talking what must have been dozens of events throughout just individual cities throughout the entire country over many, many, many months, where we're talking 5 direct and 7 extended deaths because 2 officers committed suicide after the Capitol, storming the Capitol. Was stormed, and that's the number they're going with. 7 deaths came from the Capitol. I mean, that one day that lasted what? How long was the storming of the Capitol? 4, 5, 6 hours? I mean, come on, are you kidding me? I mean,
he also called it corporate sponsored, which is perhaps a wink in the direction of the Soros conspiracy theories. I don't know. I mean, or maybe he saw that, like, Nike put BLM in a commercial and took that to mean that Nike was behind the whole thing.
Right. But the Black Lives Matter aspect aside, the completely, doesn't make any sense to bring up BLM in this context. But what he's really saying is he brings it up in the first half, is that the right wing is now pushing this idea that because this rally was pre-planned, which is being shown and proven in the trial, that means Donald Trump couldn't possibly have caused it. But they're just playing, like, they're purposefully playing stupid here, because, it was pre-planned with Donald Trump's involvement. Like, the January 6th date has been going around for months, and that's with Donald Trump and his allies knowing about this. Like, we now have from Open Secrets, they recently put out an article detailing the recent filings from Trump's campaign, his FEC filings, that shows that they gave money to the people, the organizers who put this event together. So it was pre-planned with money from Trump. What else? Oh yeah. Trump didn't just all of a sudden say, go storm the Capitol on the day of the Capitol storming when he was talking in that rally beforehand. No, he's been hinting at it. He was hinting at it, I should say, on Twitter, on Facebook, for I want to say months, honestly, but his Twitter account and Facebook account are no longer up to go back to see the exact time period. But it was definitely weeks before. He was talking about how this was something that we would have to do if the Republicans didn't get their act together for him and turn around the election results. And then as a last-ditch effort, he was threatening Pence to turn around the election results in the weeks before, too. I mean, just a few days before the rally, he said at a separate rally in Georgia that Pence better do the right thing. I mean, he had planned this along with the actual organizers who did the direct planning. Trump and his campaign was in on this from the get-go. I mean, come on. It's why he never would have outright shot down QAnon. He's been throwing wink, nudges at them for God knows how long, since he was first asked about it at a press conference over the summer, I believe. This guy, or at least the people around him, have known about this, planned it, and worked together with these organizers to make it happen. Give me a break.
Yeah. No, he obviously incited it. If you look at the tweets over time and how they line up, like we played a video in the first half of that, it just makes me feel really clown shoes that in over 100 years of communist organizing in this country, we could not get anything that exciting going. But Trump managed to do it with a few tweets and a combination of spontaneity and organization. So joke's on us, I guess.
Right.
I want to return to. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
No, please go ahead.
I want to return to what he said about the George Floyd death. The people I see really splitting this hairs there and saying that Chauvin was maybe trying to help him get over a fentanyl overdose by keeping his knee on his neck for 9 minutes, or the respiratory illnesses, respiratory issues. Like, that comes from Nazis. That's where I hear that. I hear that from Nazis in replies online. And Tucker already fired one, but obviously, like, I don't think that was the only person with that ideology there.
Right. No, of course. I mean, Tucker himself is very clearly a white nationalist. And it's just absurd to me that anyone would believe that, you know, George Floyd just happened to be having a fatal fentanyl overdose at the same time that the cop was putting his knee on his neck while he was screaming for his life. Like,
right. Well,
big coincidence.
The interesting thing is, it just came out. I think it was today I saw it, that that officer who put his knee and pressed it down on George Floyd's neck, Chauvin is his name, I believe you said, Matt. Jeez, it's been a while.
Yeah, Derek Chauvin, I think. I might be.
Yeah, Derek Chauvin. He actually had agreed in the days after to plead to third-degree murder, and AG Barr didn't accept it. I was just seeing this today.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah. So you even had the cop himself saying, I mean, obviously third-degree murder is a lesser charge than other degrees of murder, but it's still a murder charge. And he was willing to accept the fact that he played a role in killing George Floyd. And Trump's AG would not accept it. I mean, it's not every day you have a police officer saying, yeah, I did it.
Jeez. Yeah, and that was
blue.
Like, you know, that what he knows he actually did was way worse than that if he was willing to plead to third-degree murder.
Right. So speaking of the storming of the Capitol, let's play this clip, because this, if you thought that Tucker Carlson clip was crazy, this is a doozy. So Ali Alexander has been a longtime right-wing grifter. He has joined pretty much, or has been associated pretty much, with every right-wing movement that sprung out of the Trump campaign, depending on how popular it was at the time. You know, he was all right guy at first, hanging out with Milo Yiannopoulos, and then he was buddies with Jacob Wall, and he went over to Minnesota to do that ridiculous documentary Jacob Wall did about Ilhan Omar, which Jacob Wall ended up getting in trouble for lying to the police. And this guy has just had his fingerprints on every right-wing grift for like the past 5 years, honestly. And, of course, he was one of, if not the main organizer of the Stop the Steal event on January 6th that led to the storming of the Capitol. Now, he has been banned from a lot of major social media platforms since then. He has kept low because obviously he has a lot to answer for. And he obviously, people will probably want to talk to him for many court cases in terms of what happened and what went down. But he's been in hiding, but he just recently put out a new video with an update on his life. Let's see what Ali Alexander's up to.
In a lot of ways, I have no other choice but to announce that I'm building the future. And so I'm making strategic investments in tools that fight deplatforming and that create chaos on existing platforms. America's going to have a choice, and I promise you that, between going on to this dystopian future or fighting in what I'm calling the American sovereignty movement. And I'm going to get back and I'm going to do rallies again starting in March. I'm going to have indoor gatherings in March in Michigan, in Arizona, in Georgia. We have to totally change the culture. And so I want you guys to know that I've been licking my wounds, but I've been plotting. I've been planning. I've been scheming, because we have to do away with this whole system. The free press is not free, and they're not the press. They need to be abolished. So I just want to let you guys know that one, a lot of people will end up writing in a couple months, Ali Alexander's comeback was great. But I want you to know that it doesn't feel like a comeback. I created Stop the Steal while still playing in their game. Now I'm totally unhooked from that system. And those who want to live free and not feel like you have to hide when you go to church that you're a Republican or a Trump voter, I'm going to create a society and a community and a culture and a language for those people. Winning could just be 10 million people creating a new megacity. Let's build our own city. Let's seriously build our own city. Let's have a backup city in South America. Let's all of us put 10% of all of our holdings, take it out of the U.S. system and put it overseas or put it in cryptocurrency. Are the big tech platforms welcoming me back? These people are evil, and we will make lists of them. And they will not be welcomed in this new society. They won't be welcomed on new platforms.
First of all, I just want to say major brand fail calling it a mega city and not a MAGA city. I mean, it was right there in front of you, buddy. What's going on? But anyway, I just want you to notice, like, everything he's complaining about, there's no policy he's talking about. There's nothing political there. The entire right-wing outrage, I mean, they fought for Donald Trump to stop the steal, but for what? They can't name a single policy that they fought for him for. They fought to reinstate him as president for. It's literally all culture to these guys. When I got banned from a bunch of major social media platforms, when the press reports on what we say and do, we have to change the culture so everyone is a conservative and that we take over the media because we're upset that we're not, the main stars in Hollywood movies or on television, and we're not getting I mean, buddy, I'm not getting any Hollywood deals either, and I'm not a conservative.
Well, once you start talking about policies, the cross-class alliance breaks down, right? Because these are policies that mainly benefit the capitalist class, specifically the petty bourgeoisie, the small business owners that are really the heart and soul of this movement, right? Wanting a lower minimum wage, wanting immigrants to, still be here and working for you, but to have their status be constantly in question and frightened. So, yeah, if you talk about that, the working class people who are part of this alliance might realize, oh no, maybe this doesn't benefit us after all.
Right, absolutely. And then also a backup city in South America.
Tried that already.
Yeah,
that's simple. It's simple. That's not a big logistical challenge or anything.
Right. Well, besides the logistical challenge, I mean, maybe not take
Bolsonaro will hook you up. I mean,
a strategy from the Nazis, maybe.
Hey,
I mean,
it's dual power. They're doing dual power,
right? Maybe they could find a place in where was Jonestown again? Maybe they could make their own Jonestown. Was that South America, South Africa, right?
Yeah.
Guyana.
Oh yeah, okay, there you go. Yeah, maybe.
I gotta say, this is the first I've actually watched a video of this guy. Like, it's funny to hear somebody talking about. I know it was important to stop the steal, but the level of grifter delusion where he really thinks he is at the center of the universe here. And I mean, obviously, what happened on the 6th is only going to play into that. But I've never paid attention to this guy before.
Yeah, if you just played it for me with my eyes closed, I'd be like, oh, Cernovich is doing it again, huh?
Well, this guy actually, there's a reason you probably aren't that familiar with him, and that's because he's been so successful at his grifting and going, and he hasn't got caught like other guys who got banned much earlier on from different platforms where they could do their grifting. The dude has constantly changed his name and backed off of this stuff. He originally went by Ali Akbar, and then once that name was tarnished, he went by Ali Alexander. I mean, this was a guy who had who had Jack Dorsey from Twitter following him. And if I recall correctly, Jack Dorsey had previously, a few years ago, considered this guy to be someone to go to for opinions about, conservative backlash on social media. Like, this is a guy who has successfully sort of portrayed himself to people who have no political knowledge of right-wing media and culture whatsoever as like a serious thinker in that world. And, he's just been successful at grifting, honestly. And that's why you probably haven't heard of him.
It just reminds me of like the real difference between the far left and the far right when it comes to, quote unquote, liberal values like freedom of speech. I mean, not even quote unquote, like that is a liberal value, right? And we are both trying to overthrow the liberal world order in one way or another, although I argue that the left is much more revolutionary than the right, because what they want is basically a deepening of the current order and the current hierarchies and for them to continue forever, right? But like, I don't go around complaining about being censored because, if I get kicked off of one of these big tech giants, I'd be like, you know what? Fair enough. We're constantly saying that we want to expropriate them, take away Jeff Bezos's money and send him to re-education camps. So I'm like, you know what? Fair enough. But these people don't believe in liberal values either. But they're still gonna whine about it. They're still gonna try and twist it around and say why it applies to them and not to anyone else. So you know what? They can screw off. I'm trying really hard not to swear.
Right. I mean, honestly, there's a lot to knock these platforms for. And if you're even someone who's against banning people on these platforms, I get that too. I honestly have a double opinion on it. I get both sides, honestly. But at the same time, it's honestly really easy to not get banned on these platforms. I mean, there are
fingers crossed
people. There are plenty of people on the left who espouse their beliefs every single day on these platforms. I mean, we are literally on YouTube right now, Jamie. And you and I are literally here, Matt and Brendan, much further left talk here than Sam Seder even, and YouTube ain't kicking us off. I mean, it's pretty simple. Just don't outright threaten people. I mean, if like literally threatening someone's life on a platform is what's gonna, is what your ideology is based on, then maybe you should replan that ideology, or at least how you carry it out. I mean,
no, I would never actually threaten someone's life on a platform. Any calls for violence I may have made are purely parody and satire and parody.
All right, let's take some calls. Let's go to 847. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Matt, it's Comrade Pelosi.
Oh boy. Hello, Nancy. How are you? It must have been a rough 24 hours for you after hearing those videos from the Capitol. Literally
Matt,
every other
all
video.
I could think of was I missed you.
I mean, just to let people know who haven't seen it, literally every other video shown, and not just the ones they've pulled, because I've watched a lot of these videos that were previously public, even the hard to find ones that were formerly on Parler. I've seen like all of them, and literally every other video that these right-wingers who stormed the Capitol uploaded has someone making a threat at Pelosi, or your name is on their tongue and they're going, Nancy, where are you? It's got to be something else, Speaker, to know that these people were out for your blood.
Well, Matt, I got over it quick because all I could think of was you and my bread and ice cream caucus with Comrade Peck. I was in Utah this weekend with Comrade Peck skiing, plotting to overthrow capitalism.
Whoa, hold on. Jamie did not share this with us, which means that Jamie is hiding the fact that you two have begun a friendship, it seems like. Are you embarrassed of this, Jamie? More than a friendship.
I mean,
comradeship.
You think I'm just gonna say my connections and my plots and my Antifa plans on the TV for everyone to hear?
There we go. Well, thank you for calling in, Speaker.
Matt, I wrote you a poem. Hold on, I wrote you a poem.
All right. I hate to rush you, but let's get the poem out there for Valentine's Day. Okay. Let's hear it.
Roses are red. Violets are blue. I love you like I love bread and ice cream, and there's no one I'd rather walk on the bread lines with but you. Even if Valentine's Day is a dirty capitalist holiday.
Really packing a lot into that very short poem. But thank you, Speaker. I appreciate it. Happy Valentine's Day to you as
comrade.
Well. Comrade Pelosi, thank you so much for calling in. Have a great Valentine's Day, sweetie. All right, let's go to the next caller. 504. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello. Hey, is it me?
It's you. What's up? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Jeff from New Orleans. How's it going?
Hey, Jeff from New Orleans. It's going good. What would you like to talk about today?
I can talk about two things. One, I wanted to touch on the. Oh wow, it's raining. Y'all hear that? Pretty loud.
I don't. But so don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. It's storming down here. But the Amazon workers in Birmingham, Alabama, I think that it's really amazing how they've been able to kind of step up and fight for, rights on the job when against one of the biggest like monster corporations in the world.
Right. I mean, they surely got Amazon worried.
Amazon's doing all sorts of crazy shit to try to keep them from organizing, up to and including tampering with the traffic lights.
All right. And let's not forget that.
Wait, they did what with the traffic lights?
They tampered with the traffic lights. I retweeted this story. It's kind of insane.
And let's not forget that Jeff Bezos, quite coincidentally, said he's stepping down as CEO. No, I know that's not related, but yeah, these guys are really they're shaking in their little Amazon basic boots.
They're basic.
Yeah. Here we go. Amazon is forcing them into anti-union meetings, texting them up to 5 times daily, putting messages in bathrooms, even changing traffic light patterns to harm union organizing. So just had.
Oh my God! I did see on I think it was on Kim Kelly's video. She's doing like amazing coverage of this, by the way.
I saw that.
Yes.
But in her video, it showed like the bathroom stalls that Amazon had, and it had like literally, if you're sitting on the the John or whatever, you have like a unions are bad like advertisement staring you in the face. It's ridiculous.
Right.
They understand the stakes.
I just wanted to do. Yeah, they do, and I just wanted to do a big shout out. What's up?
When is that going down again? When are they?
So the drive is underway. The voting is underway. I think it's like 7 weeks of like mail-in voting.
Okay.
So it was a situation where because of the situation with COVID, they're mailing out ballots, and they're going to be they have like a 7-week window by which they are going to be returned.
I'm looking. They hired an anti-union consultant from a Koch-based think tank, a Koch-backed think tank, I should say.
Yeah, and they were pushing to force them to have in-person voting. So I'm very glad that didn't work.
Yeah, keep an eye on that because it's like one of the most important stories going on right now. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is. I don't know how much of y'all have talked about this, but the PRO Act. Are y'all familiar with the PRO Act at all?
No, I'm not actually.
So go to passtheproact.org, and I've actually talked about this on my radio show, Good Morning Comrade. You can get more information at goodmorningcomrade.com. We had Ryan Keckeris, who's with the International Painters and Allied Trade Union, and essentially it is a legislation that's being pushed by the labor unions to do things like make scabs illegal. And to make sure, like when you have a union vote, you are essentially guaranteed a first contract. So there's a lot of really, really like awesome stuff in there. Passtheproact.org. Check it out. Because that's got to get passed. That would be like a landscape changer in the labor movement in the U.S.
Right. Right. It's interesting. I was thinking too before about Ali Alexander, that right winger going off against the press. And obviously they go against the press for a multitude of reasons. But I do wonder how much some of these more institutional right wing people who help form the talking points for a lot of this stuff. I wonder how much of their backlash against the press too has to do with all this organizing going on over the past few years, because there's been a real unionization effort, I think, that really got brought back into the forefront due to a lot of these news organizations, the young people of these news organizations fighting for unionization. I think like pretty much every major outlet you can think of, and even a number of smaller and independent ones now have unions. And this is something that really was not a thing until very recently.
Yeah, I think the New York Daily News, if I saw correctly, recently got unionized staff, which is fantastic. Like,
right, and that's
you gotta love workers.
That's not some like new upstart news organization that just came out of some like digital media company. Like, this is a legacy paper.
Yeah, it is. So, like, the labor movement is really kind of clicking right now, and it's something. It's a beautiful thing to see, and you know, in sad point, I could bring up one last thing. The former president of the Chicago Teachers Union, Karen Lewis, she was with the Caucus of Rank and File Educators. She passed this week, unfortunately. So, you know, pour one out for her. She was one of the great ones. There's a really good article in Jacobin about Karen Lewis, written by Jackson Potter. You should probably check that out as well.
All right, will do. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Yeah, can I plug Good Morning Comment one more time?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, you can check us out on WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. You can also get more information and support us at patreon.com/Good Morning Comrade.
Ooh, you're on the real radio.
That's Mark Elaine
Yeah, we're on
Derry's.
the real radio. Yeah, Mark Allen's. Oh yeah, he was on the show this week. He's a friend of mine. He's been on the show a couple times as well. He's a good dude.
It's awesome.
It's very, very cool anytime I hear about a leftist on the actual radio. Like, what?
All right.
Yeah, cool.
Well,
y'all have a great day. Thank y'all so much.
And allow me to say, good afternoon, comrade.
Good afternoon.
That's what we rename Majority Report that.
That's Thursday Fun Halves.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Let's go to one more call. Let's go 504. Well, one more call for now. Obviously, we'll go back to the phones.
Should play the Amazon video as well.
Yes.
Oh yeah, can we take that on
504? I already clicked it. That's why. If he doesn't listen, if he's not on, he or she is not on though, then all right, let's play the Amazon clip.
If I had the opportunity to talk to Jeff Bezos face to face, I would really want to ask him, have he ever worked in a warehouse before? Have he sweated for 10 to 12 hours a day and not being able to go to the restroom when he needed to go?
And the issue of working conditions, I'm very proud of our working conditions.
They got cameras. They watching us all the time.
It's a lot of walking. It's a lot of fast pace. It's a lot of climbing upstairs. It's just a lot for the human body.
It's tiring. It's consistent. It's fast speed. It's unsafe because you consistently working fast pace 10 hours, only 2 breaks.
They getting treated like robots, and it's not fair because even robots break down sometimes. I have issues when ladies are talking about TOT time, time off task, when they have to go use the restroom. When they saying that the restroom could be on the other side of the building, that they have to take their walk so far and they're timing them. And when they run out of time, people are calling me emotional like, Michael, I'm on last chance. They said it's extremely hot in there. They said they have had people to pass out because of the extreme hotness in there.
Who get doctored or get TOT time for going to the bathroom? Who get doctored for going to get water if you need water, if you have to leave off your station? Come on now.
Jesus.
Yeah, we had Emily Gundelsberger on the show, I think, last year, talking about when she worked at a fulfillment center in Pennsylvania, and just like the degree to which the work is dehumanizing and just like runs you around like an algorithm. It's awful.
Yeah, and they say that they're getting treated like robots, but they're actually getting treated worse than robots, because when the robots break down, Amazon owns those robots. They have to fix the robots so that they work again. When human beings break down, Amazon just replaces them with other people.
Right.
Like, that is one advantage that, the relationship between a worker and a boss, that's an advantage for the boss. They can just, they especially in this version of capitalism, right? But, throughout the history, they can just replace workers. All human labor is interchangeable, and they are not responsible for the social reproduction, for the upkeep of the human. And they've been able to shift more and more of the responsibility onto the individual workers to keep themselves alive, and, less and less onto themselves.
Right.
And Jeff Bezos is a guy that has so much money that he can't think of anything better to do with it than colonize space.
Yeah. Right. So. Well, he's got to get off this planet before the pitchforks come for him. And if you think he's not thinking about that, you're wrong.
Oh yeah, why do you think he's so jacked now? I mean,
right.
He's huge. It looks like he's preparing for Mad Max.
He literally is. I read a really good article, a really creepy article in Medium written by this professor who gets paid to speak to, little clubs of billionaires or whatever. And the question on all of their minds is, how do we keep control over our private security forces when the shit hits the fan and there's some kind of proletarian insurrection? And
it's so feudal. It's like kings keeping control of their knights, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he said, you should probably treat them well. They're like, what do we put shock collars on them? Like, what do we do? He's like, well, if you want their loyalty, you should treat them well. But also, like, you have a lot of power to prevent this from happening. You have a lot of power in society. And they're like, what? No, we don't. This is just happening. There's nothing anyone can do about it. So, a lot of that is probably they don't want to think that they have any power or any control or any culpability in this situation. But, some of it might be like even the ruling class is depoliticized. They think that a different outcome in a different world is not possible.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Here's speaking of just living in that belief, Business Insider lets rich people put their guards down. So this is from 2018, Jeff Bezos. Business Insider. Last week, we had Bill Gates for dinner here, and he said in a self-ironic manner, oh, I love that book. He's such a cad, that he has a ridiculous amount of money, and it is so hard to find appropriate ways to spend that money reasonably and to do good with the money. So what does money mean for you, being the first person in history who has the net worth of 3-digit amount of billions? Bezos. The only way I can see to deploy that much financial resources is by converting my Amazon winnings into space travel. That is basically it. Blue Origin is expensive enough to be able to use that fortune. I am liquidating about $1 billion a year of Amazon stock to fund Blue Origin, and I plan to continue to do that for a long time. So this is why, you can only have 2 bathroom breaks, and those are stopwatched, because you're right. You're not going to spend it on a second dinner out or a third bathroom break for your employees. That's not what we are talking about. I am very lucky that I feel I have a mission-driven purpose. I mean, this is a psychopath. This is a psycho person.
You can watch this interview on YouTube. It's recorded, and he's just out of his mind. Like, even the way he compliments the set at the Insider studio is hilarious and disturbing.
Sorry, I'm still stuck on the image of having Bill Gates for dinner.
And oh my God, can you imagine describing anything Bill Gates says to you as self-ironic? I'm not giving him credit for any of that stuff. Bill Gates,
right.
Yeah.
If Mackenzie Bezos is the philanthropic queen she claims to be, she should a great way to get back at your ex would be to bankroll the union drive.
No, seriously,
that would affect her stock holdings.
Take note, Mackenzie.
Right.
I just hope if you're having Bill Gates for dinner that you bring some fava beans and a nice Chianti, because I hear that's what he likes.
Have you seen this? Speaking of weird eating, have you seen this photo of him eating the iguana?
Yes. Oh my God.
Dark.
If take that away. I don't want to look at that. Jesus Christ.
He's an odd guy, that Jeff Bezos. I mean,
he ate an iguana. If you needed a more I guess he's a lizard person and he's also a cannibal because he's eating a fellow lizard. If you needed a more accurate portrayal that the ruling class is literally lizard people who will even cannibalize their own, look no further than that photo.
Right. Yeah.
He's
Jamie,
absorbing its essence.
Is there a clip you want to get to, Jamie?
Oh geez. I just got off a plane.
Oh, okay. Why don't we look at the clips and let's go back to the phone calls, because there's something else I want to talk about.
I'll pick one out. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. You got right now or
no?
Okay, here we go. 352. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Ken from Florida.
Hey, Ken from Florida.
Hello?
How are you doing? Yes, you're on. What would you like to talk about today?
You good? So there's a local issue going on here in my area in Gainesville. The Swanee River water management basically is giving Nestle a permit to pump 1 million gallons of water in plastic water bottles a day. And we're just trying to get people together to organize to try to get them to stop doing this permit, because basically the water system in Florida is dependent on these underground springs of fresh water, and pumping water out and putting into plastic water bottles and sending them all over the country hurts the water here, because it is a finite resource that will run out. And seeing the springs in like central Florida already basically depleted, and springs work is just like a hole in the ground where the water bubbles up. And the largest spring in the world is actually about an hour south of here, called Silver Springs, and it's where a lot of Hollywood movies have been filmed. It's like this really idyllic, beautiful, natural place. And within probably my lifetime, if we continue this rate of pumping water, it's going to be gone. And we really focus on reducing the amount of water that we pump. Even though these springs are pumping out millions of gallons of water a day, even that 1 million gallons of water going into plastic water bottles makes a huge difference. And it's just like, water should be publicly owned, water should be owned by the people. And this is a bipartisan issue here where I'm from. Like, it is a pretty red area, but even the Republicans believe this. So I would just encourage people to go to, this website, floridaspringscouncil.org/action, or just floridaspringscouncil.org. And so, yeah, just to try to pressure the local council here to not give this permit to Nestle.
Right. Yeah, Nestle's not a good company. That's why do they have to do that? Do you guys remember when we were kids and there was that whole big save water campaign that sort of died down when everyone decided that I guess water wasn't such water in general wasn't such a finite resource anymore, being that they successfully were able to I don't even get why that changed. Do you guys remember when we were kids though that would be like the big environmental issue, not wasting water?
I don't actually. I don't remember that.
Me neither.
Jamie, do you remember that?
Jamie's BRB.
Oh, I didn't even. Maybe I should have the screen up on my.
It's different for here in Florida because of these springs. They're like a tourist destination. Like 1 million people come to this tiny town in High Springs, Florida, just to go on these springs, and they're beautiful. I would encourage you to check them out. And so that's where our water actually comes from. If you see Zephyr Hills water, that comes from a spring in Florida. And it's going away. These springs are going to dry up. There was another spring a little north of here, I forget what it's called, that's now dried up. And it used to be this huge attraction that people would come from all over the country to see. And it's just dried up because we're pumping all this water. And that's not even to begin to talk about all the pollution that's going into it, like all the nitrates and phosphates that are just polluting the water that comes from the agriculture in the area. And it's different because in other areas, people don't really see where their water comes from. It's deep underground, it doesn't really come up. Like, they don't really know where it comes from. Like, I don't even know where your water comes from in New York City.
Right. Reserves or something like that? I have no idea.
Central New York.
Honestly, yeah.
That's why fracking is not legal in New York, is because it would damage the water supply that comes to New York City.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for calling in about how did you get the Republicans to care about this? Did you convince them that there was a child trafficking ring going on underground in the Springs?
I think it's just important to people, and like the Republicans love doing, like, going on the Springs too. They love doing that shit too. And like, oh, sorry for cursing, but the Republicans just love water sports as well. And like, it's just something that people really do care about, and they can understand. Like, everyone's like a communist. They want public ownership of water on that one issue. Like, they understand that water should be for everyone because it's need. And I think that type of thinking, like, it's a no-brainer with water.
Right.
Yeah.
Where
Just
can
goes to
people
show
go
you.
again? Drop that link one more time.
So I would encourage people to check out FloridaSpringsCouncil.org and just write an email or write a postcard to the Swanee River Water Management District, and just recommend that they do not approve the consumptive use permit, because this is just a really important issue for our area.
Right. All right. Thanks for the call. Really appreciate it. It's very interesting. I need to look more into. I'm interested. I gotta look more into where New York's water supply comes from now. Thank you.
I know there's a lot of little shrimps in your water that make the bagels taste good or something.
Well, I didn't know that either. Now that sounds like a conspiracy to me, but it also could be true. I don't know. I have to check that out.
It sounds
I've
like
heard that,
very
like, the reason.
I will say this though. Whenever I've gone
just the reason that the bagels and pizza taste good is because of the water has like little microorganisms in them in New York.
I will say this though. I'm sure your water springs are beautiful, but whenever I've gone down to Florida, usually Orlando, your water tastes like shit. It's really bad.
That's funny.
It's the lack of crustaceans.
Well, the springs in Orlando area have all dropped. The springs in Orlando are gone, and it's like most of the springs are in north central Florida where I live, but the pumping from in Orlando and South Florida has caused those springs to dry up, and now they're taking water from our area, and that causes discharge that doesn't replenish the spring, basically.
I
do think
want to hear
these.
the word discharge when we're talking about my drinking water, but
I mean, I do think these sorts of issues are what like a red state DSA should be focusing on, or like land sales, like
absolutely,
and how those get sold to large property owners. I mean, it's like people care about common ownership, and they notice when it's taken away.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a partisan issue when people can see, oh, this is a thing happening in my life that I can see, that I can touch, and it just makes sense. It makes sense. I want ownership over that water, and a lot of people's politics don't break down neatly into left and right. So you can get people on your side who maybe voted for Republicans.
Right. All right, Ken, thank you so much for the call. Hope everything works out.
Thank you, guys.
Every time I hear the Gainesville, by the way, I think of
I think the pressure is working. I think the pressure is working.
Perfect. Good to hear.
So have a good one.
Take care.
I've heard that about the tiny crustaceans in the water. There was some article a while back. People were saying like, oh, is it kosher? Is it not kosher? Speaking as a not very religious.
Are the tiny crustaceans in my water kosher?
Yeah, like speaking as a not very religious Jew, if that's what it takes to make the bagels taste good, I'm fine with that. But other Jews may disagree. But I feel like if you can't see them, then like, do they really count as crustaceans?
I mean, you're probably eating some sort of living organism every time you open your mouth, to be quite frank.
Yeah,
and I'm sure
we're
they're
full
not
of them.
kosher. Right.
Yeah.
You have to go by like the strict constructionist view, like Scalia would want, which is that like they didn't have. Well, no, actually, shit, that doesn't work. Because I was gonna say, because they couldn't have seen them back then, so they don't exist, but actually,
everyone back then wore a tiny monocle, Matt. So they might have been able to see them.
Wow, what time period was this?
I don't know.
The past,
yeah,
the olden days.
You guys all know how well versed I am in the different periods of our culture. You've heard the story about.
Oh yeah, was that before or after Game of Thrones times?
Yeah. Sam and Michael asked me why I didn't like Game of Thrones back when I didn't like it. I didn't like the first. I wasn't into Game of Thrones for a while, and then I got really into it. But when I wasn't into it, they asked me why I wasn't, and I said to them, "I'm a big fan of period pieces."
Man, I'm all about period pieces. The White Queen on Stars, great show.
I can't do it. I think it's so boring.
You would consider Game of Thrones a period piece?
Well, it's set during a Middle Ages-esque time period.
It's a made up world.
It's fantasy. I realize that, but it's set in a Middle Age-esque. There's knights and dragons. That's the Middle Ages, but not exactly.
Dragons never existed either.
Yeah.
Well, I know that, but
I take your point. I'm ribbing you.
I mean, clearly George R. Martin based his fantasy world on existing lore that lived in the real world of Middle Age. Okay, let's go. Jamie, you got a clip you want to play?
Oh yeah, I got two in mind. Let's start with the more on-brand one for me.
Give a moose a muffin. My God, I said one clip and you got two. Amazing.
Well, let's see how we do. So, I haven't watched this yet, but I assume it's very good. People have been talking about plans to cancel student debt lately, right? First, we were like, oh, Joe Biden's going to cancel $50,000 of our student debt. I never said that. I never believed it, but some people did. Then it went down to 10,000. I'm pretty sure it's going to go down even further, and there's going to be some like intense kind of means tested hoops that you have to jump through, whatever. Regardless, it is still driving the Republicans insane. So they had on a guy to talk about how unfair it is if you work your ass off to pay off your student loan debt, and then all of a sudden everyone else's debts get canceled. But once again, as with many Fox News segments, it may unwittingly be making a case for the other side. Let's take a look.
HR consultant and Elmira College assistant professor Matthew Burr joins us right now. Matthew, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve. Thank you for having me.
All right. So this group, the Debt
office.
Collective, had a strike with about 100 student loan borrowers. They say that they will escalate action unless the president cancels all student debt in the first 100 days. You know, he hasn't really talked about doing anything that extreme, but tell us about your student loan debt history.
Yeah, so in 2011, I graduated with a master's degree from the University of Illinois. My undergraduate and graduate debt total was just about $74,000, and I had that paid off in 23 months. I took a job in a very low-cost living area and just, for the next 2 years, hammered out that debt.
Alienated myself
went
from
back to
everybody I
school
love.
in 2016. Finished an MBA at Syracuse University in December of 2017 and had $117,000 in debt, and was blessed enough to pay that off in 34 months.
Wow.
And then I'm working on a third master's degree and have half of that paid off. So in the 3 years, December 2017 to December 2020, I had successfully paid off $133,000 in student loan debt.
Okay, so obviously you were driven and you were motivated and you were very efficient at it. And in fact, you've written a book on just that topic. But what do you make of these student debt holders who are saying, you know what, we can't afford it. We need government help. Help us pay this off, Joe.
Yeah, and it's totally ridiculous. I mean, again, I've proven that it can be done, and I know everyone's not in my situation. I know people with $225,000 in student loan debt, and I absolutely sympathize with people, but you've got to get out there and work hard. I mean, at times I was working 2 or 3 jobs. I still work 2 or 3 jobs right now, building 2 businesses and teaching full-time and adjunct teaching in another college. So it can be done, and people just, they've got to get out there and move forward and work and not expect the government to come in with free money.
Horrible.
I'm dying to know what this guy's personal situation was in terms
What
of
a convincing case, right?
Yeah, just move away into a first of all, that's easy to say as a white guy. You can basically kind of move comfortably everywhere. It's not easy for a lot of cheap places are very white places in the middle of the country that aren't I mean, and that said, whatever background you're from, moving away from everybody you love so you can pay down college education is just absurd. You wonder why people are alienated from their communities and why there's no connection. It's because of stuff like that.
Well, it's also, you brought up how very white of him to go somewhere, obviously, that's cheap, where it usually is a very white neighborhood that, would probably, some of these areas wouldn't be too welcoming of black and brown people either. But on top of that, it also just shows the gap in his understanding of how different lives people lead. A lot of people from different cultures have to stay home and take care of their family. They live in multi-generational homes. They got a grandma to take care of, perhaps a sick mom or dad to take care of, brothers or sisters to raise, children of their own to take care of. This guy just completely divorced from the notion that he mentions it just as a throwaway, just so he could get that in there. So you can't bring that up to me. I mentioned that. I realize other people in different situations, but he really doesn't, though. He really doesn't. By saying what he said, it shows he's got no clue.
No, I mean, it's funny because it's like basic rise and grind, hustle stuff that he's pitching. But I mean, bro, if you're going to be doing that and that's your office, you got to be having like the luxury high rise backdrop. If you're going to be,
he's in a basement and he's in, I mean, no offense to Elmira, New York, but I went to college not far from there. And it is like a pretty blighted, downwardly, downward sort of like post-industrial town. And this guy has definitely made sacrifices that I'm sure he wouldn't have, if he felt like he didn't have to, pay off hundreds of thousands of student loan debt.
It's just an absurd system. And he's actually making a pretty good case for the absurdity of the system, right? Because you need a college degree to get most jobs, to get jobs that pay more than minimum wage in this country right now. It's not like negotiable. You can't really get by without it in this economy, in this, like you're saying, completely deindustrialized economy, right? So that's not like you really have a choice. But then on the back end, in order to pay it off, you have to do what? Like, I could see someone coming on and being like, yeah, I did it. I paid off my debts. It wasn't that hard. But he's not making a very appealing case for this system, right? Where working class people have to go to college, and then they have to basically be indentured servants for the rest of their lives in order to pay it off. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't sound appealing to me. And they have the Strike Debt Collective website scrolling on the other side at the same time. And I can just imagine some people watching this thinking, whose vision is actually more appealing here?
Yeah, and just to tag on, where the state of play is with the student loan stuff. So Jen Psaki, Biden's spokesperson, said that the Biden administration will support up to $10,000 of relief, but not through executive action, which is ridiculous. Because they could do 50,000 or as much as they wanted through. They
could do all of it.
Right? Yeah, they could do all of it. But then they're saying, so we support up to 10,000, but we'll and we defer to Congress. Well, Congress, including Chuck Schumer himself, said 50,000. So there's some dishonesty already. People are talking about, oh, thank God Sean Spicer is gone, and thank God we have people that are faithful to the truth behind that podium. No, I mean that's a fudging of reality there by saying you're deferring to Congress but undercutting what Congress is actually saying in terms of 50,000, and it's for malicious reasons. It's an absurd system meant to drive people into corporate servitude if they dare to get an education.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Also, an interesting point too is it totally depends what your career is too, what you decide to do. And I don't mean in terms of the right's going to say then don't do a low paying gender studies degree. No, I mean talking about that. I don't disagree with that.
Don't serve your community.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about that. You become a nurse or a medical doctor. This guy moved to some low cost place of living. You're going to obviously work at a hospital that obviously pays you less too if that's your career. You can't like up that amount. It's like this guy can with his consulting industry and just work online and with clients who live in bigger cities or whatever. You have to deal with the community and get paid prices in line with what the community can afford or do or whatever. And when it comes to that, your school, wherever you went, isn't going to say, oh, we're going to change our the amount you owe based on where you live now. No, like there's a chance you'll never make enough. Even if you follow this guy's exact process here, you'll never make enough to pay off these loans too. Even if you do everything right, it's just ridiculous. It's just like another reason why this argument's ridiculous.
Yeah. And he calls it free money from the government as well, which I think is interesting. And I think it is a viewpoint that is shared by the Biden administration, because look, when something is a debt, when we're talking about debt forgiveness, it's a little bit different than free money from the government, right? Like debt has not always been held sacrosanct. Going back to the rolling debt jubilees of the Middle Ages, like debt, the view on debt has changed and shifted through the years. But I think it's very telling when Joe Biden says, okay, well, we can't forgive people's debts because there would be some kind of moral hazard to that. Someone has to pay the debt. So instead of forgiving the debts, the government will use federal money to actually pay off the debts that people have accrued with private lenders. That still holds the idea of debt sacrosanct, right? Somebody has to pay it off. They can't just be forgiven. And I think if Joe Biden is ideological about anything, it's debt, right? Because he served the credit card companies for so many years in Delaware.
Right. I mean, if anything, this is a guy who should have a real understanding of what debt is, based on the fact that Obama had to help him pay for his son's medical debt when his son tragically was hit with cancer. I mean, this is a guy who should be understanding of the hardship of debt, even when you're someone who has done everything right, former senator, former vice president. I mean, and he couldn't afford, and he had Obama gave him money so he wouldn't sell off his house. I mean, this is how crazy this is. And, he should be more understanding, if anyone.
Well, then he uses that experience and turns it around in an utterly diseased way and uses it to say, oh, you think I don't understand this? You think I don't understand what it's like to have medical debt? That's why I'm doing Medicare for access for some from America if you want it. Like it's truly diseased.
Yeah, and like people should just realize like it can be forgiven for the reason that it was imposed in the first place like 50 years ago, which was to control students, because we decided we're not going to publicly provide educations. And it was a disastrous experiment for like good outcomes, but for like the reasons that Nancy McLean suggests in Democracy in Chains, it succeeded at doing exactly what it wanted, because we have all these people now. And if you got a master's degree, you're probably going to have to work for some kind of corporation. I feel very lucky to be able to do what I do, getting the education that I did at NYU.
Work on the Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Because I know a lot of people I went to school with that are doing boring ass jobs that are intellectually confining.
I'm just joking. Obviously,
you had to go work for a tech
shoes, buddy.
everyone was trying to work for a tech startup, man. It was crazy. Like people were like trying to learn like all the curriculum, but also trying to learn to code because that's where the money was. And I mean, it's and that's because that's where the interests were. We wanted to drive people, just like we previously wanted to drive people towards finance. Now we wanted to drive people towards, so we can undercut labor in the Silicon Valley.
Yeah, and there's coding camps that are predatory and take a third of your income once you get a job at like a tech company.
Mm-hmm. I know I sort of have a certain affinity for some tech companies, not the ones that are bad, and I'm talking about like the small companies that just run off of a few employees and they pay everyone well, and they're not like a behemoth that takes advantage of its users. And I mean, to me, that was always the idea that, like, when I was in college, like, damn, all these tech companies are sprouting up, and this is like the one way I can see that you're able to like make a decent living without selling out to like a major corporation. I mean, obviously, some of these companies did sell out, but you know, some of them didn't.
For now, I mean, why do you think they're putting STEM programs? Why do you think these companies are funding STEM programs in underprivileged neighborhoods? It's
right, 'cause
not
they
out
want-
of the goodness of their hearts.
Of course, they want to be able to pay software developers less money, so they're making software developers out of people who they think will be able to will be accepting less, who would accept less money, I should say.
And it's all
but
built on sand.
These same people should know, though, that they should take that knowledge, and they could totally build something with very little to no money, honestly, which is something you can't do in pretty much any other business or industry, and literally have something of your own. And possibly you can make a living off of that. Again, it's not guaranteed, but it's none of this shit's guaranteed, you know?
Yeah. Well, for now, I mean, it is somewhat concerning to me that people are being funneled by this system into an industry that is predicated largely on fictitious capital. And, you know, the long-term prognosis is far from certain.
Right. Definitely. Yes. Yeah. I mean, also, why don't these people ever come? I mean, we know why they don't, but the guests who go on there, they always like to bring a guest who's a success story. They never bring on the multimillionaire or whatever who went bankrupt, who then got everything they owed forgiven by the government and got to start anew. They never have them on then. They have these people on when they've reaccumulated their wealth and can then come out there and go, oh yeah, I'm self-made. We shouldn't be forgiving student debt. Like, the idea that we forgive bankruptcies for these businesses and these millionaires and other business owners, and that's considered just something we need to do. And why not look at if you love that, then why not look at student loan forgiveness the same? You're giving these people a chance to then make themselves something of themselves without being held back by all that debt, the weight of the debt that they have on them. I mean, It's ridiculous that they look at it. They don't look at it that way. I mean, I know why they don't, but it's just unbelievable.
Well, I do want to acknowledge that it can, like, someone might lose out in a transition to a more fair and just society, right? But that doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. Like, some people chose to go to public colleges because they were cheaper and they didn't want to be saddled with debt. Some people chose to go to private colleges because they were like, I don't really have a financial education. I don't really understand what I'm taking on, or like, I'll worry about it later. And, got more opportunities in life because of it. And I could see how those people, the people who chose to go to the cheaper colleges, might be annoyed now. But, like, that's just life. Like, did people who suffered from polio, were they mad when they started vaccinating people for polio? Like, we gotta look at the bigger picture here.
Honestly, now that we're going through a pandemic of our own, there probably were people getting mad about people getting vaccinated for polio, but not for the reasons of people already died of polio, for reasons of they're putting microchips. Well, probably not then microchips. They're putting.
That would have been an advanced conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, for back then.
Where's
It's
Michael
aliens.
when you need like
It's aliens.
anti-vaxxer FDR?
Right.
And the guy named William Gates, look out for him. Don't trust him. Then why is he buying all the farmland?
I hate that these conspiracy theorists make me not defend Bill Gates, because I always say in addendum there's plenty to criticize Bill Gates on. But they
like him buying all the farmland.
Right, but they make me come out and have to say, like, no, you're going after Bill Gates for the wrong reason. Don't attack him for 5G conspiracy theories or other bullshit that's not true. He's bad in a different way.
I have a conspiracy theory I want to float. Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation behind all that. I have no evidence for that. This is just the accusation. But I think generally with communication systems, when a certain signal is easily accessible, say for instance, you can just search things you don't have to like rely on what's on your TV or on your radio dial, but you can search things by word, like Bill Gates and farm land. That you need to add noise to that signal. And I think that a lot of conspiracy, like QAnon, I think there's some of this too, like is adding noise to signal. And so that's just something I would look out for. Maybe Bill Gates isn't doing that. Like I said, I have no evidence of this. I'm just going to cast that a suspicion, because this is just a tendency that I think it's like the dictator's handbook type of argument.
Honestly, like I get what you're saying, but this always turns into this person is also a pedophile, and I doubt anyone would pay money for that to go out there about them. So
we're just asking questions.
I mean,
we're just asking questions, Matt.
Right.
I didn't bring up pedophilia. I mean, I don't know what his relationship. Well, I mean, there has been actual proper news stories about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, for instance.
Well, right. Speaking of QAnon, actually, this I wanted to get to this really quick, and it's a short one, so I'll get to it right now. I've been seeing a lot of going around about this study. I think it was Kevin Drum, I think, who has been, honestly, he gets worse every year. So there was a study from Morning Consult. They put together a poll that showed that 18% of American adults believe in QAnon conspiracy theories. And the reading from Drum and other sort of liberals who think the same way tried to downplay the study as if it's not that much, because if you look at the actual cross references or whatever it's called, it shows that among all adults, it's something like 6% of people believe in QAnon. Among Republicans, it's 9%, and among Democrats, it's 7%. But that's still a lot if you consider that there's something like, how many people are in this country? 360 million or something like that, give or take. I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of people who believe in a conspiracy theory that claims that Donald Trump is secretly fighting a cabal made up of pedophiles within the Democratic Party, Hollywood elites, and basically other people Donald Trump just doesn't like within a deep state, who also believe in Satan and eat babies for adrenochrome, which basically is the equivalent of the fountain of youth. It's obviously why they all look so good. I mean, this
and it's a cross-partisan phenomenon.
Who are these 7% of Democrats who believe this? Who, like, I feel like if you thought this, you would leave the Democratic Party, right? I mean, who are these people who are like, yeah, I'm a proud Democrat? Who else believes that a lot of Democrats traffic children and eat babies?
To be fair, Democrats and Republicans are the pedos in this fantasy scenario.
Right,
Trump is the only good one.
Right. Well, Republicans like to say
deep
that
cover.
Trump's got his, that's exactly what they say. But then
It's hard to maintain my purity among all these swamp dwellers, but I did it because I care about all of you so much.
Now, here's another study that is, I actually think this is a little bit more worrisome because it shows just how much QAnon has become a religion. The conservative think tank, the AEI, American Enterprise Institute, so this is a conservative organization, has found via a survey that 29% of Republicans and 27% of white evangelicals, more than any other religious group, believe in QAnon. Furthermore, just under 50% of white evangelicals believe that Antifa was responsible for the January 6th storming of the Capitol. I mean, you have like half of an entire religious group with tons of power in this country, even though they like to portray themselves as over the victim. Half of them believe in an alternate universe, a completely alternate reality, which, I mean, to me, this is much different than like them just like looking past Trump's own morality and what he's done throughout his life to basically get what they want out of a Supreme Court justice who will ban abortion. I mean, this is a whole nother realm here. I don't know if you guys agree with that. That, you know, I mean, it just shows too that it's a religion at this point. Like they're bringing this into their own belief system. And there was another thing I saw. Huffington Post spoke with some people whose parents have been lost to QAnon, and I've been talking about this for a long time. There's like literally a generation of people who, and not a generation in the sense of an age group, just like, you know, a number of people across the different demographics living in this age who are lost forever to QAnon. And one woman was talking about how her mom was basically saying how if you don't believe in this QAnon stuff, then I'm afraid that when the time comes and Trump executes everyone, your time will come. And because of that, you won't ascend to heaven. You'll go to hell. Literally wrapping this all up straight into the whole belief system of the rapture.
I mean, a syncretic religion.
Right. Like,
I mean, and like, I think this is very common in American history, right? Like, you basically, it'd be weird if we went through the 21st century without a religious revival. That would be like the first time I think we did it in this country. And it is just like it's a mode of thought for when times do get really, I think, confusing. And like, I mean, like the English Civil War times, for instance, like, you know, you have like the levelers and all like the righteous, you know, like radicalism there. And then it kind of devolved into the king versus like Catholic conspiracies, and like, did the babies get swapped in the bedpan, like crazy shit like that. Like, I don't know. I feel like this is very common. And QAnon's just the current manifestation of it.
Right, but the problem to me though is I think people aren't viewing QAnon in that way. They're viewing because you see all the time, oh, how many people believed that the moon landing was fake, or how many people believe in the Loch Ness monster or Bigfoot? Like,
right, Yasha Monk is making this case today.
Right, this is a completely different thing. Like, you want to believe the moon landing was fake and you want to believe in Bigfoot, like, how harmful in the broader picture are those conspiracy theories alone? Like, yes, there are a lot of times where those conspiracy theories manifest into the more dangerous conspiracy theories like QAnon, for example. But if you just know someone who's like addicted to like researching UFOs and like searching the woods for Bigfoot and think that, you know, man never reached the moon, and that's like their whole thing and that's what they're into, like, how harmful is that really in the big picture? Like, what's the worst they're gonna do?
And some of them are based in fact. Like, not all conspiracy theories are created equal. And the majority of Americans, according to Anna Merlin's book, believe in at least one conspiracy theory. I believe in a conspiracy theory. I'll tell you right now. Something funky went on with the JFK assassination. I watched the documentary and I was pretty convinced. I forget what it was called. I'll get the name for you later. Sean made me watch it, and it was
That's
very
because they
good.
wiped your memory, Jamie, when you weren't.
Oh no! Oh no!
I mean, to me, the idea that aliens are a conspiracy theory, like maybe alien abductions, that could be but the idea that alien and UFOs,
it's a hypothesis.
It's like, it's almost for certain. Like, to me, it is 100% certain that there is alien life out there who exists in a way not similar to ours, but has, you know, has a society in the way maybe that like human beings do here on Earth, not just like, you know, like a bacteria they found on Mars or whatever.
Like PlayStations and stuff.
Right. I mean, there's no way in a universe as vast as ours, which we will never even explore fully, honestly, because it's so big, that there's not some alien life somewhere out there. Like, it's honestly very pompous of us to think we're the only intelligent life.
Now that it visits us regularly, and that is kept under wraps by the government.
Now that's a conspiracy theory. Yes.
So basically, conspiracy theories are good when
like,
when they make sense.
Like, I think like there's a lot of like the 9/11 stuff that was like insanely wacky, but it's also like, why is Henry Kissinger and what is the Bush family connections to like bin Laden's? Like, I'm not saying they let it happen on purpose or any of that shit, right? I'm just saying like there was cover-ups over connections to these people that, you know, saved reputations. And if you can throw out just an insane Alex Jones style conspiracy over, it's like what Alex Jones said about David Icke in John Ronson's conspiracy theory book, which is that he's a turd in the punch bowl. I'm trying to give people all the real info, and this guy's coming in making it look ridiculous, right? Like, that's, I think, a big function of conspiracy theories. I think that's what happened with like, well, that's not gonna
like, you think some of these are like a limited hangout? Like it's
Yeah.
channeling people's suspicions in a safer direction.
Like the Pizzagate stuff, like happening when the Epstein stuff is happening, just seems really suspicious to me. Like, like when there's actual powerful people that their reputations are so vulnerable because of their connections to this philanthropist pedophile, and all of a sudden you get this massive, bizarre, like look the other way conspiracy theory. I don't know.
Mike Cernovich was hanging out with Alan Dershowitz, and the dude's pushing Pizzagate.
Right.
I mean,
there's
are you kidding me?
Obviously something's going on there. Like we like to make the distinction on the Intifada between conspiracy theories and the parapolitical, which basically exists in the realm between confirmed fact and wild conspiracy nonsense. And the difference between parapolitical ideas, like, say something went on with the JFK assassination. There's a lot of evidence. We don't really know what it is. We don't trust the government to be telling us everything. You work with the information that you have and you work forward from that. Versus with a conspiracy theory, you start with the conclusion and you make all of the facts fit into your pre-existing conclusion.
Indeed. And the JFK assassination people that, like, I gotta say, back in like 2004 or whatever, I saw Chomsky diss JFK assassination folks, and it really made me annoyed at Chomsky for a while. But like those people, those nerds that compiled all those documents in like the 70s and 80s got eventually the government to disclose a lot of stuff that's interesting about the security state. I mean, there's a lot of stuff still being retained, and Trump didn't help matters, even though he could have. He could have released, declassified a lot of the remaining JFK stuff, and he didn't. So we'll see if Biden does. I'm not holding my breath on that either. But yeah, like that kind of effort is like, especially even like the moon landing one. Like I think we landed on the moon, but I also like understand why people entertain the idea that there was some Cold War incentive that used like the state propaganda apparatuses, like the newly disciplined film industry after McCarthyism to send a message. Like I don't mind where that leads people, to be honest.
Right.
You just have to be, I think, a bit arm's length from some of this stuff and not let it consume you or believe that you have found the truth, because I think a lot of this stuff like is murky.
Trust no one.
The problem is that like people like you and me and Jamie, we have the literacy in this new fangled digital world, the digital literacy it's called, to understand what we're reading and take it at the value in which it should be appropriately taken. Like we're not going to take a well-reported story that's posted by a distinguished journalist who has a reputation, the same as the truth is out there blogspot.com. Like we understand where this all comes from. And I think a lot of people here, even with these sort of conspiracy theories that you guys are talking about, they'll go to something and they'll read it and they'll get into more dangerous sort of territory in terms of what they're because they don't have
there's wolves in those. There's wolves that are like frankly former intelligence people that are masquerading as like, I'm going to tell you the truth about JFK, that tell you a slightly wrong truth about JFK. Like, yeah, you can't trust any like that's why like it's better to go like what Jamie says, to the materialist view of things. But I do think one eye on the conspiratorial agents in history is interesting.
Yeah, I would like to take a look at the kinds of religious revivals and conspiracy theories that flourished during the Gilded Age, because I think there are a lot of similarities between now and then. So
I wonder how many of them have even been recorded though. Like I wonder what's out there, because like obviously there was no public online record where people were just putting this stuff down forever to be screenshotted and archived. Like people would just say this stuff out in public and share it, and like how much of that stuff was even recorded?
The truth, Matt. The truth is out there.
Yeah, that's the thing too. The people who had the wherewithal and or education to record this stuff, they were from a different, think about it. Like if QAnon didn't have the internet and somehow this conspiracy theory happened, how many of their beliefs would have been written down? Like how many people with the education system to record this stuff would have taken, even looked at it to even bother putting it in, chisel it on a tablet or write it in print. You know what I mean? Like Just throwing that out there. Just throwing that out there. Imagine. I'm just saying. I wonder what crazy shit people believed in that we have no idea about it because it was in a part of society that did not have the technology or education or the ability to put this stuff down for later generations.
I guess we'll never know.
We won't.
Unless we get that time machine working.
Right. Let's go to some IMs came through, even though they weren't working earlier. I guess Kyle fixed it somewhat. Famous Darwin, just want to say that Matt Lex FDR comes from the same place deep inside that classic MR's Michael Bloomberg comes from. Were you doing a Mickey Mouse FDR?
I don't know. I don't even remember how I was doing it, to be honest.
I think it was just a similarly joyous performance.
Right. Decoy Rob says, for the stats on QAnon beliefs, you have to remember it's a little like Scientology, where people will think of 2 to 3 of the myriad of things QAnon is and think that's it without knowing all the really deep and crazier stuff. Explains why someone is a Dem and thinks QAnon isn't crazy. They don't know. I guess it does depend how exactly the question was worded. But in one of those surveys, at least, I think it was the religious one. So that means it doesn't include the Dem part that you brought up. But in the religious one, I think they specified, because they also asked about the Antifa planning the Capitol, which obviously a lot of QAnon people believe, and it's a conspiracy theory that flourished because of QAnon, but it's not the core QAnon conspiracy theory. I believe they distinguished the core QAnon conspiracy, which is the pedophilic child trafficking cabal of Democrats and Hollywood elites. So I guess it depends on how it's worded. You're right. Stacy Wolf, far right Christians have always found things to add to biblical salvation. 20 years ago, people at my church questioned my commitment to God because I hadn't seen Mel Gibson's The Passion yet. There's always something. Wow. Kid tested, Politburo approved, says, old Matt, you're speaking my language when it comes to aliens. I mean, right. Aliens have to exist. I mean,
okay, Tom DeLonge.
I was just about Tom DeLonge. Is Tom DeLonge?
Well, it's either aliens exist or God made us special. So,
no, but isn't that crazy though that Tom DeLonge? I know that I was seeing somewhere that the longtime like alien UFO conspiracy theorists hate Tom DeLonge because to them he came from out of nowhere and with his fame and fortune became a major figure in their world. And actually did more than they ever did by uncovering those governmental videos that show those unidentified flying objects. They're like super jealous that he did that. Like they hate him for it.
Maybe they should have tried a little harder.
Honestly, though, I totally get it. Put all that work in being one of the earlier people to get on something and just get none of the credit when everyone
this is like when
to me all the time.
This is like when Preet Bharara came to Cafe.
Oh, that's... I don't know when I could talk about that or if I find out.
Yeah, when's your NDA up?
Yeah, I didn't sign nothing, so maybe I'm fine.
You're fine then.
Yeah, I was actually thinking more recently. A few days ago, CNN fucking put. I'm sorry for saying for cursing, but I'm really pissed off about it. Actually, just a figure, like literally like 2 or 3 days ago. Breaking news. New video emerges from the Capitol, and it's the QAnon shaman explaining that he left because he saw the tweet from Trump saying it's time to leave. And he says that I was there because Trump told us to be there. And he discusses how the cops let him out of the Senate chambers and walked him out. And I am the first person who found that video in the Parler archives and put it on Twitter a month ago. Breaking news, new video a few days ago. I put it out a month ago. Really pissed about it, to be honest.
What was the thing that got Brian Williams canned from NBC?
He said he was in a helicopter in Iraq or Afghanistan, excuse me, that was fired at by like a ground,
Oh, did the Hillary?
Yeah. I'm like, oh man, come on. Oh, all right, let's. Always happens to me, man. It's one of the problems of being the first to everything, because then once everyone gets on board, you're already bored and tired of it, and everyone new is jumping on, and they're getting all the credit.
Spoken like a true punk.
QAnon. I mean, that's honestly, that's my life story. Punk rock ruined me by making me always first to everything.
It's hard to be the vanguard, man.
Yeah, it is, man. I remember back in high school, people making fun of me for wearing super tight pants. And then years later, those same kids were wearing super tight pants. And one of them even admitted, man, we gave you all that shit long ago. And here we are wearing these tight pants.
I feel the same way about having bushy eyebrows. And now all the women my age are asking me how I got them to grow in so nice. And I'm like, bitch,
is bushy eyebrows a thing? I mean, honestly, I don't even notice eyebrows when my partner
Matt's too concerned about people's pants to notice their eyebrows.
Yeah, when people say, when women on the street say to me, "Hey, buddy, my eyes are up here," it's because I'm too busy admiring their tight pants.
Nice.
And for punk rock aesthetic reasons, not because I have a leg thing or anything.
No, all the women my age plucked their eyebrows to shit because of Drew Barrymore in the late 90s, early 2000s, except for me. So now I have the eyebrows of a much younger woman.
See, my partner will come back from the eyebrow place and not tell me and say, notice anything? And I'll, no.
Yeah.
I don't notice eyebrows. Sorry.
No.
Big, bushy, or plucked. Is that what it's called? I don't know.
Well, a lot of people do, so that's all right.
Listen, a true ally to women know that they are all beautiful.
Aw, that's very sweet.
Okay, let's. I guess that's it, right? We got the. That's it for today. Is there any more IMs? I'll read a few more. There's a few more, and just a couple more. Stop calling him a shaman. He has nothing to deserve the honor, says Like and Describe. I had a few like new age people getting really mad at me for calling him the QAnon shaman. It's like literally his thing, though. It's what he calls himself. Like, that's what he calls himself. That's what am I supposed to call him?
The QAnon charlatan, more
Right.
like it, because he's not a real shaman.
All right. Oh, Kyle posing the question of the ages to me. What about a period piece about wrestling? Ooh, that would be.
Isn't that Mark Maron show, basically?
That you're right, Glow. And
What?
you know what? Glow is good. I enjoyed Glow. I don't know if I'd consider the 80s a period piece, but I guess in the sense that any.
So you consider a fantasy show a period piece, but a specific decade of 40 years ago is not a period piece. I got it. I'm following your logic now.
That's
Bender, you mean you don't like
Bender.
feudalism? I think
Right,
that's
right.
what Matt means. Like,
When
I don't
I
like
think of
feudalism.
period, when I think of period pieces, I think of like the time
Monty
all the movies
Python.
set in like the French Revolution or Marie Antoinette and all those like English royal shows. That's what I think about when I think of period pieces, Victorian era stuff. That's
bodice rippers.
That's what I think.
Downton Abbey.
Downton Abbey. Yes, that's what
Love
I think. And
that show.
Stuff. See, that's the stuff I can't deal. I have no interest.
Well,
Yeah.
some of us like to watch the fall of the aristocracy and the rise of the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, I gotta say I've been really after Last Kingdom and then like the Stars like shows based on Philippa Gregory, starting with the White Queen. I need it to be based in some kind of history. So if anybody has historical, especially if it's like actually true to history with historical figures and historical like events happening, because otherwise I don't know. I can't watch like The Hobbit. It's boring. This is all like the nonsense projection from some weird Christian.
No, The Hobbit was a terrible movie.
I never got the whole Lord of the Rings love because like I can't remember the last time I've seen the whole thing of one, if I've even seen a whole, because I usually just tuned in when I never saw them in movie theaters. But the idea that like it's just a crew of fantasy characters just traveling all the time, it seemed, just walking.
Yeah.
Just walking all the time.
No. Lord of the Rings was good. The Hobbit sucked. And there's a good video that I saw about why that was from some video, some movie YouTuber whose name currently escapes me, but I'll tweet it later because it was really interesting.
Lord of the Rings is multiple books, which they gave each book got its own movie. The Hobbit is a singular book, which even I've read, and let me tell you, I don't read long books. Even I've read, and they turned that short little book, which is a good book too, by the way, into a trilogy. How do you wrap your head around giving these big books each one movie per book, but this like tiny little book, 3 movies. I don't understand that at all.
Because
Other
of
than
the
fact
profit
that
motive.
They knew that. Yes, I mean, yes.
Come on.
Once again, capitalism ruins everything. Should we do another IM or two and then say goodbye?
Then that's it. Yep. So Solo says Star Wars takes place a long time ago, Matt. Is that a period piece? That is a very good question. And because I don't consider space to be within those period piece eras, no, I've never considered Star Wars a period piece. It's science fiction, I guess. Correct. Yeah. Is Stranger Things a period piece? Asks Emma's 5-star foot rating. That's another. I don't, because again, the 80s is not a period piece to me. Listen, I was born in the 80s, so
You're
obviously
just trolling
it could not
now.
be a period.
All right, let's wrap. Let's go.
All right. That's.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
You got nothing.
All right, folks. That is the show for today. Jamie, Brendan, Matt, it was an absolute pleasure. This was like the old Emma wasn't here, which Emma, we miss you. But with that said, it was like the old times earlier in the pandemic when Emma wasn't here, and it was just us shooting the shit.
One could say it was a period piece.
That's true. There you go. Putting the what is it? The dotting the I right there, Jamie.
Also,
and, bring us full circle.
Good afternoon, comrades.
Right, there we go. Good afternoon, comrades. Stay tuned for the Nomiki show at Nomiki's channel at 3 at the top of the hour. It's coming up in just a few minutes. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Matt Binder. Catch the podcast version of the live stream show at doomedpod.com. Follow me on Twitter at Matt Binder, or really any social media. Just search Matt Binder. I'll pop up, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Matt Leck, you got a Leck reckoning, right? Left reckoning.
Left reckoning 8:00 tonight, folks.
And
tune in. Go ahead, Jim.
The Antifada 6:00 tomorrow.
Ooh, and
Twitch.tv/the Antifada.
Brendan, would you like to plug anything?
Keep watching the Majority Report, and don't listen to Matt's movie definitions.
Ooh, okay.
I'm just kidding.
Right.
I love you, Matt Binder.
We should end it right there. Ladies and gentlemen, Brendan loves Matt Binder. Beautiful. Take care, everyone. I will see you all next week. The rest of the MR crew will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar.